Chapter 754. Yu Qianqiu stared at the wine cup in front of him in a daze. Huang Tian smiled faintly, thinking that Yu Qianqiu had been intimidated by his earth control technique. Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu's little heart was trembling when he heard the words earth element. In a split second, a deep night sky star map became incomparably clear in his mind, and his heart surged in an instant. Although it's not the wine of the immortal world, it's still a fine wine of the mortal world. There's no poison in it, so try it. Huang Tian's words pulled Yu Qianqiu back from his daze. Yu Qianqiu's eyebrows moved slightly, and a trace of disdain flashed through his eyes. He picked up the wine cup without hesitation, and drained it in one gulp. So what if there was poison in it? Yu Qianqiu didn't believe that it could be more poisonous than the soul-dispelling smoke. He wasn't even afraid of the soul-dispelling smoke. So why would he be afraid of a small cup of poison wine? Good wine. Yu Qianqiu smacked his lips and praised. Just as he put down the wine cup, he saw a hand reach out from the table and help him fill up the wine. Then, the hand disappeared from the table again. Yu Qianqiu resisted the urge to grab that hand and touch it. He looked around and asked curiously, "The underground palace is all earthy yellow. Is it because of the soil?" "That's right." Huang Tian stroked his beard and smiled. "When I was sent here to take care of affairs, I was tempted to build Yellow Soil City, because I saw the large yellow soil plains here." Yu Qianqiu's heart stirred and he asked again. "City Lord Huang is proficient in the earth element technique, but you're interested in this place. Is there some difference between yellow soil and normal soil?" Huang Tian nodded and smiled. "It's rare to see people care about this." "That's right. For those who cultivated the earth manipulation technique, although they could control any kind of soil, for beginners, yellow soil was the easiest soil for them to learn and familiarize themselves with. For example, black soil and red soil were much weaker in terms of affinity. Also, yellow soil is more powerful for those who cultivate the earth control technique. The rarest thing is that the yellow soil here is very pure, with almost no other types of mixed soil. Coupled with the existence of such a large area, I was tempted to build a city. Yu Qianqiu had a thoughtful expression on his face. He vaguely remembered that he had read about the 5 elements in a book in his previous life. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth each represented the 5 directions of west, east, north, south, and central, and each corresponded to the 5 colors of white, green, black, red, and yellow. He had already practiced the 3 magic arts of metal, water, and fire. It was precisely by relying on the understanding of the north, west, and south star maps that he comprehended at the same time that he simultaneously practiced these 3 magic arts. His body also produced 3 crystals of white, black, and red, which were astonishingly consistent with the records of the 5 elements in the books of his previous life. In that case, he was certain that he was still lacking the cyanwood element of the Eastern Star Chart and the yellow earth element of the Western Star Chart. Now, coupled with what Huang Tian had said about the yellow soil being beneficial for cultivating the earth control technique, didn't that mean that the best time for him to cultivate the earth formula had arrived in this yellow soil plain? Thinking back to the night sky star map that had suddenly flashed in his mind, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but become excited. The 5 star maps had already been deeply imprinted in his mind. There was no mistake. The star map that had involuntarily flashed in his mind was the Eastern Star Map, the position of the Earth Formula's star map. His previous cultivation experience of the 3 5 elements magic arts told him that the 5 elements magic arts couldn't be forced. Every time he was attracted by the same element, the corresponding star map would automatically flash in his mind. At the same time, this also meant that the opportunity to cultivate the 5 elements magic arts had arrived. How could he not be excited? He deeply felt that even if he didn't find the purple fire in the Eastern Holy Land, it wouldn't be a wasted trip. If he hadn't deduced wrongly, once he successfully cultivated the earth formula, his cultivation would break through to the soul formation stage. Seeing that he hadn't come back to his senses after a while, Huang Tian asked suspiciously, "Could it be that you're also interested in cultivating the earth control technique?" That's not it. I just suspect that City Lord Huang's surname is Huang, so that's why I like the yellow soil." Yu Qianqiu casually said. This kind of nonsense was something he could easily come up with. What kind of logic was this? Huang Tian was stunned. He smiled and said, It's true that my surname is Huang, but I still don't know little brother's surname and name. My name is Yu Qianqiu. After Yu Qianqiu returned to his senses, he asked, I wonder what secret city Lord Huang wants to ask me by bringing me underground? It can't be that you only want to ask my name, right? Huang Tian stared at Yu Qianqiu with a smile for a while before he slowly said, Although I don't know why I can't see through your cultivation, judging from your reaction when I attacked earlier. If I'm not wrong, your cultivation shouldn't be at the soul formation stage. Am I right? Huang Tian smiled and looked at Yu Qianqiu for a while before he slowly said, Although I don't know why I can't see through your cultivation, but judging from your reaction when I attacked. If I'm not wrong, your cultivation shouldn't be at the soul formation stage. Am I right? Huang Tian nodded. I've guarded this place for many years, so I know a little more than others. That is, if your cultivation hasn't reached the soul formation late stage, even if the East Holy Land opens, you won't be able to enter through the entrance. If you force your way in, you'll definitely be crushed into dust by the power of the heaven and earth formation. Then I believe that a human cultivator, like you, has another way to enter the East Holy Land. Am I right? Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's heart shook. He didn't expect this to be a flaw. He narrowed his eyes and said, So what if I'm right? So what if I'm wrong? Looks like I guessed right. You do have another way to enter the East Holy Land. Hee. I didn't expect to encounter it. Huang Tian finished the wine in front of him in one gulp. He put down the wine cup and took a deep breath. It was clear that he was trying his best to calm his agitated emotions. His fingers knocked on the table firmly and said, This is the reason why I brought you underground. The secret I want to ask is for you to tell me how to leave this East Holy Land. Yu Qianqiu looked around and said with a cold smile, If I don't tell you, are you going to imprison me here? You can understand it that way. Huang Tian said indifferently. But this isn't the most important reason. I'm afraid that the walls have ears outside. How can such an important secret fall into the ears of others? Could it be that you want to keep this secret to yourself? Yu Qianqiu put on a fake smile and said, Don't you want to tell this secret to the immortal monarchs of the East and West palaces? Wouldn't that be a great merit? A great merit? Haha. Huang Tian laughed loudly. No one knew what he was laughing about, but there was some bitterness hidden in his laughter. After laughing, he shook his head and said, This isn't something you should be concerned about. You just need to tell me the secret. Yu Qianqiu said with an "Oh. Why do I feel that once I tell the secret, it will be my death day? Because you don't want a second person to know this secret. Do you have a choice? Huang Tian said indifferently. I don't have a choice, but what I want to tell you is that there is actually no secret, because I don't know how I got in here. Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, Are you satisfied with this answer? Huang Tian's expression turned cold. He stood up and said, Yu Qianqiu, don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Yu Qianqiu also stood up slowly and said, Either way, I will die if I don't tell you. If I don't tell you, I might live a little longer. You can do whatever you want. The reason why he was so stubborn was that he was prepared to leave at any moment. After all, the other party would not kill him before the secret was revealed. Unexpectedly, Huang Tian snorted coldly and raised his hand to form a claw above the table. In the blink of an eye, a ball of earth appeared on the table, and a wisp of golden fog was injected from his palm. After doing all this, Huang Tian turned around with his hands behind his back. As he walked, he said, It seems like you still need some time to think about it. Once you've figured out how to break the ball of earth on the table, I'll be happy to listen to your secret. But remember, my patience is limited. Don't make me use extreme measures to force you. Don't think about escaping. This place is more than enough to trap you. A hole appeared in the wall in front of him. As he walked out, the wall quickly healed seamlessly. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He thought that the other party was going to torture him, but he did not expect him to be so gentle. Did he really think that he couldn't escape from this underground palace? He contacted Utopia again and realized that it was still unobstructed. He immediately relaxed. He thought to himself that Huang Tian was underestimating him too much. He looked around and walked to the spot where Huang Tian had disappeared. He waved his hand and slapped the wall heavily. The impact caused his arm to feel a little numb, but it did not leave a single mark. The wall was actually as hard as iron. He then took out the green fire flying sword to test it out. In the end, it easily stabbed in with a pft. It was not as hard as he had imagined. However, the moment the flying sword was pulled out, the wall seemed to be alive. It was soft and hard, and it quickly recovered to its original state. Yu Qianqiu faced the wall speechlessly. It was easy to stab the sword in, but with his cultivation, if he were to fall in, he would probably be crushed to death by the immense pressure from the surroundings. It was no wonder that Huang Tian thought that he could not escape. Tisk! Yu Qianqiu waved his hand in disdain and put away the green fire flying sword. He casually threw a small silver ball to the corner and disappeared from the underground palace. On the surface, after Huang Tian came out, he slowly walked to the pavilion in the garden. He stood with his hands behind his back as if he was waiting for something. Not long after, a stream of light suddenly shot over from the horizon. A black-clothed man appeared in the garden. When he saw Huang Tian in the pavilion, he immediately bowed and said, "Greetings, City Lord Huang." Huang Tian laughed out loud and cupped his hands. "Brother Yufeng is an envoy of the Celestial City. How can you greet a small border official like me? I have already prepared good wine and delicacies for you. Please." "I dare not," the black-clothed man said politely and walked side by side with Huang Tian to the brightly lit pavilion. If Yu Qianqiu saw this scene, he would know that it was not that Huang Tian was gentle and did not torture him, but that he had something to do and did not have time to tangle with him for the time being. In the dungeon west of the city, Yu Qianqiu appeared again. The moment Immortal Lord Crocodile saw him, he immediately transmitted his voice. "Where did you go, kid?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at Boli and the others who were still tossing and turning on the pile of hay and transmitted his voice. "I've already killed that bastard Shang Huan. But who would have thought that I would run into Lust City's city lord? Do you know who he is? It's that old man Huang Tian, who gave us clothes for free. I almost suffered a great loss at his hands." "You escaped from him?" Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianqiu in shock. "Nonsense! If I didn't escape, would I still be here talking to you?" Yu Qianqiu said impatiently. "I came to tell you the truth. I have something to do, and will be leaving for a period of time. I don't know when I'll be back, but it won't take too long. You guys can stay here for a while. This is for them to eat and drink. It should be enough until I return." A storage bag was thrown to Immortal Lord Crocodile. Chapter 755. What did he mean by uncertain return date? What did he mean by temporarily suffering here? Immortal Crocodile was a little dumbfounded. Before he could say anything, Yu Qianqiu had already disappeared. He quickly checked the contents of the storage bag, only to find that the contents were enough for Boli and the rest to eat for more than a month. Looking at the pitch-black prison, he suddenly felt his scalp go numb. This kid wouldn't let us stay here for a month, would he? The night breeze was cool, and there was no one on the lush plain. Occasionally, a few mice would jump around under the hazy moonlight. Yu Qianqiu's sudden appearance immediately frightened the group of mice, and they quickly scurried into the nearby holes. After carefully observing his surroundings, Yu Qianqiu's body leaped into the air lightly and landed in a ditch tens of meters behind him. When he had passed by this place on horseback, he had thrown a small silver ball here just in case. He did not expect it to really come in handy. However, the surrounding terrain was too open, and the ditch was only a few meters deep. He did not know how long he would be staying here. He could not possibly just sit here and cultivate, right? It was still barely passable at night, but if it was during the day, he would be easily discovered by passers-by. His eyes suddenly landed on a mouse that happened to pop its head out of a hole to take a look. His eyes immediately lit up, and he scurried back and forth in the ditch that was hundreds of meters long before he found a side wall that had caved in. With a flick of his sleeves, 6 black flame flying swords flashed out and formed a drill that rapidly drilled into the ground, causing dust to rise for safety reasons. He dug a tunnel that was more than 30 meters deep into the ground. Most of the crushed soil was sent into Utopia, and the rest was used to seal the entrance of the hole. At the end of the tunnel was a round nest with a diameter of 2 meters, which was enough for him to meditate and cultivate. Waha! Looking at his masterpiece, Yu Qianqiu could not help but dance and laugh wildly. He rubbed his hands together excitedly, sat down cross-legged, and slowly closed his eyes. Just as he silently memorized the middle-level star map in his mind, the vital energy in his body began to fluctuate uneasily. Yu Qianqiu was so excited that he was trembling slightly. If he remembered correctly, this was the same feeling he had when he was comprehending the gold art. It was as if there was a similar attribute around him that was attracting him. Because he was too excited, he actually couldn't get into the zone for a long time. He knew that there was a problem with his mentality. If he continued like this, he didn't know when he would be able to comprehend the cultivation method from the complicated star chart. This was a very complicated project, so he had to adjust his mentality. He immediately steadied his breathing and cleared away the excitement in his mind bit by bit. After a long time, the distracting thoughts in his mind were gradually discarded, and his mind entered a state of selflessness. The expression on his face relaxed, and he became expressionless. In his closed eyes, there was only the pitch-black night sky full of twinkling stars, as if they were guiding him to find the secrets hidden within the endless stars. Amidst the tranquility and emptiness of his thoughts, the middle-ranked star map that he had memorized by heart began to flip through the pages every night. In the vast starry sky, there were fixed constellations in the sky every night, as well as stars that were constantly changing positions. In the instant that the star map alternated every night, his entire body entered a wonderful state. It was as if there was nothing in the world, and there was nothing in his heart. There was only himself, the sun, the moon, and the stars, and he was swimming in the sea of stars. The trajectories of the stars' changes gradually became clear in his mind, and his brain quickly calculated the changes of every star on the middle-level star map. With such complicated changes of the stars, if he didn't enter a state of selflessness and abandon all distracting thoughts, how could he experience the changes of every star? His mind was dead silent. When the star map overlapped each other every night, the trajectories of the stars' changes gradually became traceable. Those fixed stars in the starry sky transformed into bones, flesh, and meridians in his mind. Those moving and changing stars gradually formed the trajectories of his true essence. With the traceable trajectories, it was like spinning silk from a cocoon, and all the problems were easily solved. The calculations in Yu Qianqiu's mind became smoother and faster. The traceable trajectories of the star map expanded little by little, becoming clearer and clearer, and gradually becoming more complete. When he had completely mastered it, the trajectories of the stars in his mind were all connected together, like a constellation that was connected by strokes. After the other insignificant stars suddenly flashed, they seemed to have completed their mission with a faint smile and retired into the vast night sky. In the universe, only the summarized trajectories were circulating. In the cave, Yu Qianqiu sat cross-legged with his back against Mother Earth, as if he was eternally sitting cross-legged. His mind was completely integrated into the universe's vault of heaven, and he was neither happy nor sad. The true essence in his body had already begun to imitate the perfect trajectory of his martial arts. In the instant that he completed one circulation, all the pores on his body opened up. Only in this pitch-black cave could one see that his entire body was emitting an earthy yellow light. In the instant that the light could be seen, it shot into the surrounding soil layer and disappeared. It was also at this moment that the earth seemed to be summoned. In the deathly still cave, a dense life force gradually appeared, as thin and hazy as fog. This was a mist formed by the gathering of yellow fairies that were difficult to see with the naked eye. They were indistinct and unfathomable, singing joyous songs and jumping about. Fairies that had not appeared for billions of years. Since ancient times, we have been sleeping in the embrace of Mother Earth. If not for the boundless universe's summons, we would have always existed with Mother Earth. Everything on the earth, because of our support, is able to grow and multiply endlessly. Even if the heavens and earth collapse and the stars no longer exist, we can still turn into tiny specks of dust and wander in the vast universe, never to be born or destroyed. As long as there is a place where we exist, there will always be a day when a new celestial body is born. We represent eternity. The hazy mist that was summoned from the cave became thicker and thicker, but it still lingered around Yu Qianqiu's body and refused to approach. It seemed that there were still doubts about this monster, Yu Qianqiu. Could it be that he was really representing the universe to summon us? They were deeply doubtful. When a wisp of mist tried to approach Yu Qianqiu, it was quickly absorbed into Yu Qianqiu's body, and there was no abnormal reaction. This proved to the other fairies that it was indeed Yu Qianqiu who was summoning them. Yu Qianqiu was like Mother Earth and could completely rely on them. All the doubts in the cave were gone. In an instant, the mist in the cave rushed madly towards Yu Qianqiu. It drilled into every pore of his body, looking for the home that belonged to it after it woke up. Once it was chosen, it would continue to advance without any regrets and accompany him for life. When a surging yellow stream began to appear in his meridians, a knowing smile appeared on Yu Qianqiu's face. He knew that he had succeeded. He had successfully cultivated the earth formula of the 5 elements magic arts. After confirming that there was no mistake in his understanding of the earth formula, Yu Qianqiu quickly increased the speed of the magic arts, striving to reach the level of proficiency as soon as possible. The speed of the magic arts became faster and more proficient. The majestic yellow stream finally converged into a river in his meridians and converged towards Yu Qianqiu's central dantian. In the instant that the yellow stream rushed into his dantian, the body of the little boy, who had been sitting cross-legged and cultivating by himself, suddenly blossomed with a dazzling golden light and disappeared in a flash. The little boy suddenly opened his black and white eyes, which were full of spiritual energy, revealing a look of pleasant surprise. The red, black, and white crystals that were circling around his body also suddenly increased the speed of their circulation. It seemed that they were also very excited. The yellow stream gradually filled his entire dantian. The little boy suddenly opened his mouth, and using both his mouth and nose, he sucked in big mouthfuls of the yellow fog into his stomach. He kept sucking, and kept sucking until his stomach was slightly bloated. Only then did he burp, choking out a few wisps of yellow smoke, and stop absorbing the yellow fog. Then, the little boy slowly closed his eyes, as if he was digesting the food. Seeing that there was no one else to receive them, the yellow fog that had continuously flowed into Yu Qianqiu's body, starting from the walls of his dantian, and seeping into his limbs and bones, looking for its own home in every cell. Only when the earth element had filled every cell did Yu Qianqiu stop the circulation of the earth formula. He slowly exhaled, opened his eyes, and excitedly waved his fists. Then, as if he had thought of something, he paused for a moment, then immediately closed his eyes and began to examine the movements in his dantian. According to his experience with the other 3 magic arts, after mastering the earth formula, he should have a breakthrough in his cultivation. The little boy's bloated stomach slowly sank, and when it became flat again, the little boy suddenly opened his eyes, opened his mouth, and spat out a yellow crystal bead. The crystal bead was like a living creature, happily flying around in his dantian. The little boy looked at it with a smile, and suddenly, his small hand gently waved at the yellow crystal bead, and the yellow crystal bead obediently fell into his palm. The little boy twirled the crystal bead and looked at the other 3 beads that were circling around him. No one knew what he said, but the 3 beads immediately stopped revolving. The little boy placed the yellow crystal bead between them and adjusted the distance between the 4 beads evenly. After he chuckled, the red, black, white, and yellow crystal beads began to revolve at a uniform speed. The little boy slowly closed his eyes, and his chest suddenly expanded as he sucked in a mouthful of true essence from his dantian. The speed at which the 4 crystal beads revolved increased, once again turning the true essence in his dantian into a tornado. The resulting strong suction force was like the eye of a tornado, sucking all the true essence in Yu Qianqiu's body back into his dantian. This feeling of true essence flowing in reverse caused cold sweat to appear on Yu Qianqiu's forehead. However, he was in pain and happy at the same time, for he knew what this meant. He was no longer the newbie, he was when he first started cultivating the 5 elemental secret arts. He knew what he needed the most right now: spiritual energy, a large amount of spiritual energy. What the current Yu Qianqiu lacked the least was spirit stones. In a flurry, he took out 2 big handfuls of glowing black divine-grade spirit stones. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead as his face contorted into a grimace. Both of his hands gripped the divine-grade spirit stones, madly absorbing the majestic spiritual energy contained within. There was nothing he could do about it. The nascent soul in his dantian was sucking his true essence, and he could only absorb the spiritual energy from the spirit stones to replenish his meridians. Otherwise, he would die from the pain. Chapter 756. No matter how the ruler treated the people, Baiwan was at least a country without foreign aggression. The people's lives were not too difficult. The reason for this was that ancestor Wen Lanfeng was behind it, so no one dared to attack Baiwan for the time being. Of course, ordinary people didn't know who Wen Lanfeng was. Only a few high-ranking officials of Baiwan nation knew who he was. However, because of the death of Baiwan's emperor, the whole country seemed to be in deep mourning, with white mourning everywhere. Although the emperor had passed away, the country still needed a successor. Thus, Crown Prince Wenhao naturally inherited the throne and became the new emperor of Baiwan. Outside the filial bedchamber, white banners covered the sky and the earth, and mournful wails could be heard everywhere. The coffin of the late emperor was in the center of the palace. The new emperor, Wenhao, and his mother knelt on 3 soft cushions below. The last one was empty, and no one knew who it was for. Behind him was a group of the late emperor's concubines, each of them wearing mourning clothes and weeping. Whether or not they really missed the late emperor, their grief was real. With the late emperor gone, they, who often competed with the empress for favor, might not have a good life in the future. The day of the new emperor's reckoning was not far away. The eyes of the former empress, now the empress dowager, were red and swollen. She glanced at the empty cushion to the left of the emperor from time to time, unable to hide the anger in her expression. In addition, she had knelt for so long that she was about to fall. Emperor Wenhao reacted quickly and supported her. He asked anxiously, "Mother, are you tired?" The eunuch of the Department of Rites did not dare to be negligent and hurried over to help. "The Empress Dowager is not feeling well. Your servant will help her to rest for a while." The Empress Dowager stubbornly pushed the 2 away and stared at the empty cushion on the left. She said angrily, "Where is Qing? On this mourning day for her father, does she still not change her playful nature?" The emperor immediately gave the eunuch a look. The eunuch understood that the new emperor was protecting his sister and did not want the Empress Dowager to hurt her health. He said with a sorrowful face, "Due to the death of the late emperor, the princess is too sad and hurt her body. It is inconvenient for her to kneel for a long time, so she is staying in the Green Scent Palace to observe mourning. She is not as playful as you think." When the Empress Dowager heard this, the anger on her face gradually disappeared and was replaced by a trace of worry. The emperor immediately said to the eunuch of the Department of Rites, "Go and see how the princess is. Don't let anything happen to her." "Yes." The eunuch hurriedly retreated in fear and trepidation. Inside Wenqing Palace, the guards and palace maids all performed their duties with white filial piety. In the princess's bedroom, white mourning clothes were thrown on the ground, as well as women's undergarments. Panting and moaning could be heard coming from the brocade mattress on the side. A man and a woman were naked together. The man was carrying 2 smooth legs and was violently pounding them, as if he was madly venting. The sound of slapping echoed in the entire dormitory. After the deed, the man heaved a sigh of relief and slowly fell to the side. A head of silky black hair slid to the side of the pillow, revealing its true appearance. It was none other than Yan Juexing. The woman whose face was flushed red after her orgasm was the princess of Baiwan nation, Wenqing, whose cheeks were still flushed, suddenly burst into tears. She threw herself onto Yan Juexing's body and punched his chest forcefully with her delicate fists. Yan Juexing's eyes were indifferent as he allowed her to hit him with all her might. Her waving fists gradually lost strength. Wenqing buried her head in Yan Juixing's chest and wailed at the top of her lungs. "You're not human, you're not human. I'm a bad woman. I'm an unfilial daughter. How could I do this to you at a time like this?" During the pleasure in bed, she felt extremely comfortable because of the orgasm, but after waking up from it, she blamed herself deeply and felt extremely conflicted. Outside Wenqing Palace, the eunuch of the Department of Rites had just arrived when he faintly heard Wenqing's heart-wrenching cries. He couldn't help but sigh in relief. He thought to himself, this is indeed the deep love between father and daughter. No wonder she was the most beloved daughter of the late emperor. This is a cry that comes from the bottom of her heart. Just as he was about to step through the gates of Wenqing Palace, the guard at the gates suddenly waved his arm to stop him. The eunuch of the Department of Rites was startled and immediately shouted, "I'm here on the orders of the new emperor to visit the princess. Back off." He thought he could scare him off, but the other side said expressionlessly, "The princess is too sad and doesn't want to see anyone. Eunuch, please go back." "How dare you? You dare to disobey the emperor's orders." The eunuch of the Department of Rites was furious. He had the emperor's orders, but someone dared to stop him. However, the other party was truly bold. With a clang, a long knife was unsheathed, and a cold light flashed in front of the gates. The guard said in a low voice, "The princess has orders. Anyone who trespasses will be killed without mercy." The eunuch of the Department of Rites was so frightened by the blade that he took a few steps back. He pointed at the guard and said, You, for a long time. He really couldn't understand. Could it be that this guard's head had been kicked by a donkey? Could it be that he couldn't distinguish between the princess and the emperor's orders? In the end, he had no choice but to leave with a flick of his sleeve. Yan Juixing, who was lying on the bed, heard everything clearly. The guards and servants of Wenqing Palace were all controlled by his demonic eyes. He had nothing to worry about. Seeing that the matter was over, his cold eyes stared at the hipster, who was crying on top of him. He waved his arm and pushed her to the side of the bed, wanting to get up. The still crying hipster was slightly startled. As if she had woken up from a dream, her naked body jumped up and knelt on the brocade couch. She hugged Yan Juixing tightly. Yan Juixing turned around indifferently and said, "Didn't you say that I'm not a human? Why are you still hugging me?" The hipster paused. Then with red eyes, she shook her head desperately and said, "I was wrong. I won't scold you anymore. Where are you going?" "Where I go has nothing to do with you. Let go." Yan Juixing said indifferently. "I won't let go." The hipster hugged him even tighter. Back then, when she disguised herself as a man and met Yan Juixing, she was deeply attracted by his speech and elegant demeanor. He was many times better than the nobles around her. However, after they parted in a hurry, she didn't see him again. After that, she searched the entire Lan city, but didn't find any news about Yan Juixing. His accidental appearance opened her heart, but he disappeared without a trace, leaving her with endless melancholy. After that, because she had reached the age of marriage, the emperor had been looking for a husband for her. She used Yan Juixing as the standard and eliminated batch after batch of people that she didn't like. However, at the moment when her father passed away, when she was heartbroken, Yan Juixing magically appeared by her side again. This made her believe that her father knew from the underworld and fulfilled her long-cherished wish. However, this time, Yan Juixing seemed to be a different person. After spending a short time together, he forced her to be his woman. He didn't show any pity in bed. It seemed that he had something unhappy in his heart and was venting it on her. He didn't care if she was dead or alive. It made her heart go through 1,000 twists and turns. But no matter what, his hesitant heart finally had a place to look forward to. Even if she resented him or hated him, she had given her body to him. She was determined to be his woman for the rest of her life. But now, seeing him like this, it seemed that he was going to leave her again. How could she let him go? "I beg you, don't leave me." Wenqing hugged Yan Juixing tightly with her attractive naked body. The original arrogance and unruliness had disappeared. Her face was full of the expression of begging and extravagant hope. The death of her father had already hurt her heart. At this time, Her heart was as fragile as a window paper. If Yin Juexing took her body and abandoned her, she couldn't imagine how she could live. Suddenly, Yin Juexing turned her over on the bed without warning. He dragged her white and tender thighs over, lay down suddenly, and forcibly entered her body. Then he crazily sprinted again. The huge force almost made Wenqing's skeleton fall apart. The tearing pain almost made her suffocate, but she still bit her lips and forced a smile to please him. After the raging wind and rain, Yin Juexing lay quietly on one side. Wenqing next to him seemed to be dead, and her body was motionless. After a long time, Yin Juexing stood quietly under the bed, and Wenqing's weak plea came from behind him. "Don't leave me." Yin Juexing slowly turned around, and Wenqing's lifeless eyes showed a pleading look. She stretched out her pale hand powerlessly, as if she was grasping a life-saving straw. She murmured and begged, "Don't leave me." Her outstretched hand suddenly fell down softly. Her eyes slowly closed, and her head tilted to one side powerlessly. The helpless eyes seemed to regard him as the only dependence in this life. The sincere, powerless, and absolute dependence made Yin Juexing, who had been hiding and running for his life, tremble all over. His blood was instantly ignited to boil. At this moment, he suddenly understood that not everyone in this world wanted to kill him or make use of him. There was such a woman who really loved him. She was naked and very frank, and needed him to rely on her, without any selfish thoughts. The faint smell of blood filled the room. Yin Juexing's eyes that had turned from cold to soft suddenly shrank. His gaze fell on her lower body, and the dark red blood was soaking the bed. Yin Juexing's cold expression suddenly became terrified. He, who was used to seeing blood, couldn't help but tremble. He shouted helplessly, "Wenqing." After that, he seemed to realize that he had to save Wenqing. He took out the elixir from the storage bag on the ground and flashed to the bed. He quickly pointed at Wenqing's acupoints to stop the bleeding. After stopping the bleeding, he immediately helped Wenqing sit up. He put a spirit pill into her mouth and sat cross-legged behind her. He placed his palms on Wenqing's back and desperately injected demonic essence to help her recover. Looking at his anxious and somewhat crazy appearance, it was hard to believe that this person was really Yin Juexing. Wenqing, who was almost pulled away by the god of death, began to breathe again. Yin Juexing snatched her back from the hands of the god of death. At this time, Yin Juexing finally let out a sigh of relief. He gently picked up Wenqing and kicked away the blood-stained blanket. He pulled a clean blanket over Wenqing and placed her on the bed. He carefully stuffed a pillow under her head. Chapter 757. Slowly and meticulously, he put on his clothes and returned to the black-robed Yin Juexing with long hair draped over his shoulders. He slowly sat on the side of the bed and silently watched Hipster's face gradually recover its rosy color. He couldn't help but gently reach out to touch her face. Hipster seemed to sense it. Her eyelids moved slightly, and she seemed to murmur in her sleep, "Don't leave me." Yin Juexing was frightened by this sound and withdrew his hand. He suddenly held his head with both hands and let out a hysterical silent cry. His expression was extremely painful. He didn't know what happened to him just now. Why did he desperately vent his unhappiness on a mortal woman and almost kill her? When Hipster's breathing completely stabilized, Yin Juexing sat on the side in a daze. His expression was dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. He stared at Hipster's sleeping face and murmured, "Hipster, I hope there will not be a day when you hate me." Suddenly, footsteps came from outside Wenqing Palace. Yin Juexing suddenly looked up, and his face returned to indifference, surrounded by a group of people. The new emperor, Wen Hao, came to Wenqing Palace under the guidance of the eunuch of the Department of Rites. There was no other reason. After hearing the eunuch's quiet report, his sister hid in Wenqing Palace and cried her heart out. But the guards didn't let him in to check. Wen Hao, who was deeply in love with his sister, found an excuse to get away from the Empress Dowager and hurried to see her, afraid that his sister would really cry and hurt her health. This time the guards at the door didn't stop them. They held their sabers at their waist and half knelt to let Wen Hao and the others into Wenqing Palace. The maids in the palace all knelt down. Wen Hao walked out of the room, and suddenly turned back to shout at the people behind him, "Wait outside." However, the nascent soul cultivator, Wen Bai, who was his personal bodyguard, still followed him to the door. It wasn't that the Wen family couldn't spare experts to protect the emperor, but because of Wen Lanfeng's reputation, no cultivator dared to break into the Baiwan kingdom's palace to cause trouble. Therefore, the experts with good cultivation hid in the Wen family's sacred land to cultivate. Royal sister, Wen Hao knocked on the door several times, but there was no reply. Wen Hao hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open and walked in. As soon as he turned into the bedroom, he saw a quilt and a woman's underwear on the ground. What made him even more shocked was that a man in a black robe with long hair was sitting in front of the bed, staring at him coldly. Wen Hao was shocked. "Who are you? Why are you here?" Suddenly, he saw the other party's eyes glowing red, and his consciousness instantly blurred. When Wen Bai, who was guarding the door, heard the movement inside, his figure moved and immediately flashed in. The imperial bodyguard who followed him from outside also reacted quickly. Quickly drawing his sword and waving it, he said, "Protect His Majesty." A group of guards pulled out their swords and rushed into the room. Who knew that just as they rushed to the door, they saw Emperor Wen Hao striding out and shouting in a deep voice, "Impudent! Princess Wenqing is not feeling well. Without Zhen's summon, no one is allowed to disturb Princess Wenqing's rest. Retreat to the outside of Wenqing Palace for Zhen." Finished speaking, he turned around and walked back into the inner room. Yes, the group of people retreated out of fear, and not long after, all the people who had just arrived had retreated to the outside of Wenqing Palace. At this moment, Wen Hao and Wen Bai, who were in the bedroom, were bowing to Yan Juexing. "Greetings, master." Yan Juexing looked at Wenqing, who was sleeping soundly, got up from the bed, and waved at the two of them. "Let's go to the main hall and talk. Don't disturb her rest." When the three of them were about to leave the bedroom, Yan Juexing carefully closed the bedroom door. Yan Juexing paced to the main seat in the main hall and sat down. He stared at the two people who were standing respectfully below him and asked, "How many cultivators are there in this palace? What are their cultivations?" Wen Bai immediately replied, "Including me, there are 4 in total, and they are all nascent soul cultivators." "Only 4 nascent soul cultivators?" Yan Juexing was slightly startled, then felt that it made sense. Normal cultivators, even if they were experts at the final stage of tribulation passing, wouldn't dare to trespass into Baiwan Nation's palace, so there was no need to be on guard, as if they were facing a great enemy. So he frowned and said, "Don't tell me that when the emperor passes away and the new emperor succeeds the throne, the people in the Wen family's holy land won't care?" Wen Bai replied, "That's not it. When the late emperor is buried, the ancestor of the Wen family, Wen Rui, will come on behalf of the ancestor to crown the new emperor, which means that the new emperor has been recognized by the Holy Land and is allowed to inherit the Wen family's throne." "Wen Rui," Yan Juexing pondered and said, "Is it the early-stage soul formation cultivator Wen Rui, whose cultivation is only below Wen Lanfeng's?" "Yes, it's him," Wen Bai replied. Yan Juexing's eyes flickered. "I've long heard of this person's name. When he comes to crown the new emperor, find a way to bring him here to meet me. If possible, I'd like to go with him to pay my respects to Senior Wen Lanfeng. Sai, I want to thank Senior Wen Lanfeng and the Wen family disciples for taking care of me in Spirit Fong Valley." "Yes." Wen Bai bowed and accepted the order. Sitting cross-legged in a cave under the lush plain, Yu Qianqiu had already thrown a small pile of depleted spiritual energy stones in front of him. Both of his palms were still holding a big handful of shiny black crystals, crazily absorbing spiritual energy, not daring to stop. If he stopped, the spiritual energy in his dantian would not be able to keep up with the absorption, and his meridians would twitch in pain due to the lack of spiritual energy. Yu Qianqiu's eyes widened as he stared at the small pile of depleted spiritual energy stones in front of him. As he threw out the 2 handful of depleted spiritual energy stones, the expression on his face was uglier than crying. If he did not calculate incorrectly, He had already used more than 500 divine grade spirit stones. One divine grade spirit stone was equivalent to 100 million high-grade spirit stones. So 500 divine grade spirit stones was equivalent to 50 billion high-grade spirit stones. Oh my mother! Yu Qianqiu calculated in his heart, cold sweat dripping down his forehead. 50 billion high-grade spirit stones. What kind of concept is that? If he had not met a mortal crocodile, the amount of spirit stones he had swindled from Yin Baikong would not have been enough, and he would have had to use the big pile of treasures he had found in the demonic ghost domain. Even if a cultivator had just stepped into the cultivation world and cultivated all the way to the peak spirit severing realm, he would not have needed 50 billion high-grade spirit stones. What the hell is going on with this broken cultivation technique? Why does it burn so much money? Moreover, it's still burning. Does it want people to live? If it wasn't for his good fortune, what would the consequences of cultivating the 5 elemental cultivation techniques be? Wouldn't he be whipped to death? F***ck. This world is really dark. Even cultivating is forbidden to the poor. Isn't this bullying the poor? At this time, his dantian was like a bottomless black hole. Even after filling it with more than 500 divine grade spirit stones spiritual energy, it was still not full. It was still madly absorbing spiritual energy, with no signs of stopping. It was too scary. At this time, even Huang Xiaolong himself was unable to check the situation inside his dantian, and could only crazily transfer spiritual energy into it. When the number of divine grade spirit stones reached 600, Yu Qianqiu's heart was already numb. He mechanically took out spirit stones to absorb spiritual energy, and only cared about transferring the majestic spiritual energy into his body. Sitting there counting while absorbing spiritual energy, this was the only thing he could do at the moment. There was no point in thinking too much about it. He wanted to see how long this bottomless black hole would take. He refused to believe that this bottomless black hole could absorb all of the 100 million divine grade spirit stones Immortal Crocodile had given him. If there was really no other choice, he could only teleport to the Yellow Earth Layer's prison and ask Immortal Crocodile, that rich guy, to continue supporting him. He believed that Immortal Crocodile wouldn't be stingy, otherwise if he died, the old monster would be trapped alive in the Eastern Holy Lands. Thinking of this, Huang Xiaolong's mind was at ease, no longer worrying about not having enough spirit stones. By the time Yu Qianqiu counted close to 900 pieces of divine grade spirit stones, the rate of spiritual energy absorption in his dantian suddenly slowed down. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. Coincidentally, when he reached 900 pieces of divine grade spirit stones, his dantian finally stopped breathing. Crash! The dried-up spirit stones fell to the ground. Yu Qianqiu was speechless looking at them. It had been a long time since he could remember clearly, and he didn't take it to heart at that time. However, he remembered clearly that he had used around 300 million high-grade spirit stones when he cultivated the gold arts on the Immortal Ascension platform. Now he actually used 90 billion high-grade spirit stones, which was equivalent to a 300-fold increase. Based on this calculation, if he had a chance to cultivate the wood arts, would his spiritual energy increase by another 300-fold? 900 times 300 was equal to 270,000 divine grade spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu sucked in a breath of cold air, as he suddenly felt that his dantian was abnormally quiet. He quickly used his spiritual sense to check his dantian. Fortunately, the movements inside his dantian were no longer as loud as when he was absorbing spiritual energy. His divine sense was able to detect the movements inside his dantian. At this time, the amount of true essence inside his dantian was as thin as mist. Although the little boy's nascent soul was still the same size, it had turned into a middle-aged man, looking exactly like Yu Qianqiu, sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. The four-colored crystal bead that had stopped spinning started to spin again, pulling Yu Qianqiu's dantian along with it. The spinning speed became faster and faster, dazzling the eyes of those watching. In the end, the things inside his dantian reminded Yu Qianqiu of a picture of Saturn from his past life's textbooks. The nascent soul that looked like him was spinning into a round ball, resembling Saturn itself, and the 4 crystal beads resembled the rings of Saturn's moons. Moreover, they were multicolored rings, extremely beautiful. All of a sudden, a loud boom resounded in his dantian, akin to the Big Bang. The rings of light around the 4 crystal beads suddenly expanded, and the perfectly round nascent soul in the middle exploded into a cloud of dust, filling his dantian in an instant. The dust from the explosion rushed out of his dantian, entering every meridian in Yu Qianqiu's body. In that split second, Yu Qianqiu finally experienced what it meant to be sweet after suffering, feeling so comfortable that he let out a moan. He felt that his whole body was full of explosive energy, a kind of powerful energy that he had never experienced before, so powerful that it felt like it was going to rush out of his body. His bones and veins were stretching and contracting with a creaking sound. It was a pleasant feeling of reaching the sky in a single bound. He opened his eyes abruptly, and they flickered with a bright light. He was filled with unprecedented confidence. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath and closed his eyes again to check the situation inside his dantian. With just one glance, he was immediately stunned. He saw that the 4 colored crystal beads were spinning at a moderate speed, and 2 nascent souls that looked like him appeared in it. They sat back to back with their eyes closed, inhaling and exhaling the aura inside his dantian to refine it. Yu Qianqiu immediately remembered what Nongzhu had told him about the 3 souls and 7 spirits. The nascent soul was the life soul of the 3 souls and 7 spirits. When another soul was born from the life soul, it would be the heavenly soul, which was the sign that one's cultivation had entered the divinization stage. Chapter 758. Could it be that I've really reached the soul formation stage? Yu Qianqiu asked himself. He was so excited that he was trembling. Although the powerful energy in his body told him that he was right, he still felt like he was dreaming and couldn't believe that it was real. He took a deep breath and stood up slowly. The bones in his body cracked, and he looked up at the top of his head. Suddenly, a huge imposing aura burst out from his body. His whole body was like an arrow that had left the bow, directly shooting upwards. Boom! A deafening sound echoed. There were few people on the vast plain. It was unknown how many years it had been like this. The yellow earth that had been roasted by the scorching sun suddenly trembled. Then, a pitch-black hole appeared on the flat ground with a bang sound. A silhouette darted out from the smoke and dust that had burst out, and stood still in the air for a moment. Yu Qianqiu floated in the air quietly. He clenched his fists in excitement. It didn't take much effort for him to break through the thick yellow earth with his body. He was sure that he had reached the soul formation initial stage. He didn't expect that he would achieve what he had been pursuing for so many years. He didn't expect that he would reach the soul formation stage one day. He thought back to when he first entered on Kwangsung. He didn't expect that he would become one of the soul formation experts from today onwards. He looked around and felt a sense of pride. He had been improving rapidly. He believed that one day, he would be like his master, Bai Changchun, and become a real torture master of the demon region. Roar! Yu Qianqiu floated in the air and opened his arms. He looked up to the sky and let out a long howl. His passionate howl echoed across the vast yellow earth plain. The long howl stopped. He was in high spirits. His gaze was like an owl as he stared at the hole that he had created on the yellow soil plain. He waved his palm to cover the hole and shouted, "Rise!" The yellow earth plain below surged like waves and piled up in the middle. It got taller and taller. In a short while, a cone-shaped mountain rose from the ground. The mountain rose to a height of 100 meters and supported Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu stood quietly at the peak of the 100-meter-high mountain and gazed into the distance. There were many experts that he could look up to in that distant place. In that distant place, his master, Bai Changchun, was constantly surpassing himself and improving his cultivation. What about him? He was only at the soul formation initial stage. Compared to them, he was still far from them. There was nothing to be happy about. He still had a long way to go. However, Yu Qianqiu's eyes flashed. He suddenly said to the world, "In 100 years, who will rise and fall? Rise!" With a deep shout, as he spread his arms, the 100-meter-tall mountain under his feet suddenly shot out a group of densely packed yellow dots, shooting into the surroundings and disappearing without a trace. As he clapped his palms together, the yellow dots that were flying in all directions quickly flew back with a whistling sound, and all stopped around the mountain peak. Yu Qianqiu was surrounded by flying swords made of yellow soil. There were at least 10,000 of them. Myriad swords as one, Yu Qianqiu shouted in a deep voice. He pointed the sword control art toward the sky, and the surrounding flying swords immediately swarmed. In an instant, the earthy yellow flowing light flickered in all directions, and tens of thousands of swords danced in the air with astonishing momentum. They all quickly converged in the direction he pointed. In the blink of an eye, a gigantic sword hovered in the air and spun slowly. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the vast land with the sword control spell, and the gigantic sword whistled downwards. Bang! The earth trembled, and the giant sword sank into the yellow plain in an instant. It was also at this moment that the dirt mountain beneath Yu Qianqiu's feet began to disperse like quicksand, spreading layer by layer in all directions. Yu Qianqiu followed the lowered mountain and landed steadily on the yellow plain. Everything around him returned to normal, as if nothing had happened in the first place. Translator, Exodus Tales Editor. Exodus Tales. Yu Qianqiu landed on the yellow plain. The yellow dust stirred up by the wind blew past his feet. Yu Qianqiu held his chin with one hand and stood alone on the yellow plain, frowning and deep in thought. The figure immersed in the yellow soil under the setting sun looked lonely and mysterious. Judging from the previous 3 kinds of 5 elements spells, each of them was not simple. As long as it was used properly, it could exert its magical effect. The fire spell was the spell he had always used the most frequently. After absorbing the black fire, the use of the black fire became his trump card to defeat the enemy. After comprehending the absorbing star's great technique of the water spell, he found that it was a wonderful spell for killing people. He hid it as a trump card and rarely used it. As for the gold spell, although it was not suitable for killing people, its magical effect was extraordinary. So far, he had not found any metal magic weapon that could block its attack. All kinds of metal magic weapons that he had tried were immediately turned into dust as soon as they touched the gold spell. Many magic weapons that he had obtained in the cultivation world turned into floating clouds. He even had the impulse to use the gold spell to test the godly sword. However, he was afraid that the power of the gold spell would destroy the godly sword, so he refrained from experimenting with it. He could only wait for an opportunity to use other people's treasures to experiment. So far, the gold spell had not been used in actual combat. It was only used to scare people, because he found that the gold spell was more suitable for people with high cultivation in close combat. It was not suitable for long-range attacks. In close combat, it could unexpectedly destroy the opponent's magic weapon, and then kill them. If it was used with other spells, the auxiliary power would be quite amazing. Its practical significance was not weaker than any other spells. Now that his cultivation had broken through to the soul formation stage in one fell swoop, the range of his chi movement was wider. Whether it was using the flying sword, the absorbing star's great technique, or the gold spell, he could exert greater power. Especially the absorbing star's great technique. With the current cultivation of the soul formation stage, once it was used on a large scale, it was simply an unparalleled killing spell. Even he felt a little scared when he thought about it. If such a spell fell into the hands of people with bad intentions, it would be a big disaster. Of course, there were times when the absorbing star's great technique failed. It was in the battle with Yan Juexing in Lingfang Valley. Yu Qianqiu still couldn't understand why the absorbing star's great technique couldn't kill Yan Juexing. He clearly couldn't resist it. He had already been sucked dry, but he could still come back to life. It was simply incredible. Could it be because they all had the word Xing in their names? Like repels like? Bullshit. The power of these 3 spells had already made Yu Qianqiu confident. The only thing he didn't know was how to properly use the earth spell that he had just successfully cultivated. If it was only used to pile up a mountain of earth and gather an earth sword, it would be too boring. Even if it was an earth-controlling technique like Huang Tian, Yu Qianqiu didn't care anymore. For the earth spell, it was just child's play. After thinking about it, Yu Qianqiu still couldn't figure out how to use it to display the power that the earth spell should have. The ability of the first 3 spells was clear for all to see. He didn't believe that the earth spell was so useless. If only Master Bai Changchun was here. Perhaps with his extraordinary perception, he could give some pointers. Thinking back, wasn't the absorbing stars great technique taught by Bai Changchun? Otherwise, Yu Qianqiu wouldn't have thought that the water spell could be used in this way and display such power. After thinking for a long time, he still couldn't figure out anything. He realized that thinking like this wasn't a solution. He could only wait for himself to slowly understand. Looking around, he was suddenly slightly shocked. He didn't know how long he had been here. If Huang Tian found out that he wasn't in the underground palace, would he find a mortal crocodile and the others in the dungeon to settle the score? I hope the old monster can hold on. Yu Qianqiu suddenly disappeared from the plains. In the dungeon of Lust City, as soon as Yu Qianqiu appeared, he quickly glanced around and immediately heaved a sigh of relief. No one was missing inside. Boli and the others were playing with the straw under their butts out of boredom. Immortal Crocodile was using his arms as a pillow and crossed his legs, seemingly imitating Yu Qianqiu. As soon as he saw Yu Qianqiu appear, Immortal Crocodile stood up straight and transmitted his voice. "Where did you go, kid?" Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, indicating that there was no hurry to ask this. He transmitted his voice back. "How long have I been gone?" Immortal Crocodile was stunned. "You've been living your life in a daze. You don't even know how long you've been gone? 3 days. You've been gone for 3 whole days." "Oh." Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly, thinking that it wasn't long. He asked again. "In the 3 days I was gone, did anyone cause trouble for you? I say, kid, did you leave this place because you wanted to be alone and watch others cause trouble for us?" Immortal Crocodile sneered. "I'm sorry to disappoint you. We've been sleeping here every day, and no one has even come to ask us questions." Yu Qianqiu immediately waved his hand and interrupted him. "Don't talk nonsense if you don't know. I've been busy helping you recover your cultivation, and I've almost broken my legs. Why are you still here nagging? Do you have any conscience?" As he spoke, he frowned and pondered. If Huang Tian knew that he had escaped the dungeon, he would definitely come to check this place. Now it seemed that Huang Tian didn't know that he had escaped the dungeon, so there was still room for discussion. Immortal Crocodile's expression stiffened, and then he asked excitedly, "How are you doing? There's already some progress, don't worry." Yu Qianqiu glanced at them and said in a deep voice, "It's not a good idea to stay here all the time. Nothing can be done. I'll go find Huang Tian again and ask him to let us out and give us an honorable identity." Hearing that there was some progress in recovering his cultivation, Immortal Crocodile immediately said humbly, "I'm not in a hurry. I'm not in a hurry. You go on with your work. Is Huang Tian that easy to talk to? Don't worry about it, I'll think of a way. Wait for me, I'll leave first." Yu Qianqiu said and disappeared again. The dungeon was still the same, and the things inside were still the same. Yu Qianqiu checked everywhere with his hands behind his back, guessing that Huang Tian might not have returned. His sharp gaze landed on a mud wall, and he waved his sleeves at it. The wall immediately melted like snow, and a pitch-black hole quickly appeared. It didn't seal itself like the last time. Child's play. Yu Qianqiu snorted disdainfully. He waved his sleeves, and the hole quickly healed. He walked back to the table, looked at the mud ball on the table, and waved his hand, turning it into dust. Chapter 759. Lust City's triennial fence meet had begun. In the beginning, the so-called fence meet had indeed used wooden fences to surround the competition grounds. This was also the origin of the fence meet's name. However, with the passage of time, many cities had appeared in the originally barbaric Eastern Holy Land. The fence meet had long since lost its wooden fences, and the competition grounds were specially built. If Yu Qianqiu were to see it, he would definitely discover that the competition grounds were very similar to the ancient Roman Colosseum. Although the locals in the city usually held the natives in disdain, they were still very interested in the fence meet. That kind of bloody and barbaric scene could thoroughly arouse the passion of these city dwellers. Therefore, Every time the fence meet was held, it was usually very difficult to obtain a ticket, and not everyone could enter to watch the competition. In the competition grounds, there were 20 warriors from various tribes divided into 10 groups, fiercely confronting each other. Within the 10 partition boxes, 2 of them had already finished their matches in advance. The victors waved their strong arms and roared excitedly as they left the arena, their bodies covered in blood. The losers, on the other hand, were already lying motionless on the ground, no longer breathing. As soon as the onlookers saw the blood, their passion was immediately ignited, and they cheered loudly at the victors who left the arena. No one cared whether the wounded who were dragged away were dead or alive. Next to the arena stood a tall tower, which could also be considered a landmark of Lust City. In a small room at the top of the tower, Lust City's city lord Huang Tian and Immortal City's emissary Yu Feng were indifferently watching the fights below through the window. The cheers from below could be heard clearly from above. The first round of matches in the arena below had already ended, and the people for the next round were currently entering the arena. Huang Tian stared down below and indifferently asked, "Brother Yu Feng, I heard that someone turned the Great Lord's mansion upside down and killed many people. Has the person who caused the trouble been caught?" Yu Feng's expression became solemn, and he said in a deep voice, "That person is very likely a cultivator from the outside world, but he's very strong." "Very strong?" Huang Tian smiled faintly and said, "Since we suspect it's a cultivator from the human world, how strong can a cultivator from the human world be?" Yu Feng shook his head and muttered to himself, "No one knows the exact origins of this person, but there's no need to doubt his valiant methods. Let's not talk about the trouble he caused in the Great Lord's mansion. He charged into the Immortal City twice, but no one was able to stop him. You can imagine his methods." Huang Tian's body trembled when he heard this. He turned around and cried out involuntarily, "What did you say?" There were as many experts in the Immortal City as there were clouds in the sky. He had barged in twice, but no one could make him stay. How was this possible? Could it be that the 2 immortal monarchs were not present at that time? Yu Feng gazed into the distance through the window with a lingering fear in his eyes. He sighed and said, "It's like a tiger entering a flock of sheep." The first time he barged into the Immortal City, he killed over 100 immortal cultivators. Among them, there were 3 early-stage immortal emperors, and the rest were mostly grand immortals. In the end, it was Immortal Monarch Night Owl who managed to severely injure him, but he managed to escape. What? Immortal Monarch Night Owl didn't manage to stop him? Huang Tian cried out again. There was no doubt about the abilities of the 12 immortal monarchs in the immortal world. They were some of the top figures in the immortal world, and were only second to Immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Huang Tian was suddenly pulled back to reality by the passionate cheers in the arena. He asked impatiently again, "Didn't he barge into the Immortal City twice? Did he still dare to barge into the Immortal City after being severely injured by the immortal monarch? That person is a monster. He recovered from such heavy injuries in just a few days." Yu Feng shook his head and smiled bitterly. Just when Immortal Monarch Night Owl was making arrangements to capture him, he actually came to us. The second time he barged into the Immortal City, his cultivation seemed to have increased by quite a bit. He managed to enter and exit from the encirclement of over 1,000 people, and killed over 300 immortal cultivators, including 8 early-stage immortal emperors. How terrifying! Huang Tian was dumbfounded by these words and asked tongue-tied, Kill so many people, did Immortal Monarch let him go?" He had actually guessed it in his heart. With Immortal Monarch Night Owl's vengeful personality, how could he allow that person to escape again? Perhaps even Immortal Monarch Night Owl couldn't stop him. It's not that he was let go, but that he couldn't. Yu Feng revealed a frightened expression as he recalled. Towards the end, no one dared to make a move against him anymore. Wherever he went, the people there would all flee. In the end, Immortal Monarch Night Owl had a one-on-one duel with him. What was the result? Huang Tian asked. Yu Feng looked around warily, hesitating as if there were some things that he couldn't say. Huang Tian immediately guessed that the latter part of his words might be disrespectful to Immortal Monarch Night Owl. He couldn't say it out loud, So he transmitted his voice. Brother Yufeng, don't worry. You and I will communicate through voice transmission. No one else will know what you said today. Yufeng nodded slightly and transmitted his voice with mixed feelings. In that battle, Immortal Monarch Night Owl was no match for him. The last time that person barged into the Immortal City, he was severely injured by Immortal Monarch Night Owl's treasure, the 1,000 feather wings. This time, Immortal Monarch Night Owl's treasure, the 1,000 feather wings, was completely destroyed by that person, and Immortal Monarch Night Owl was injured quite badly. Huang Tian was immediately shocked. As someone from the immortal world, of course he knew about Immortal Monarch Night Owl's treasure, the 1,000 feather wings. It was a top-grade treasure that could attack and defend in the immortal world. What shocked him the most was that Immortal Monarch Night Owl was injured. Yufeng continued to transmit his voice with mixed feelings. At this critical moment, Western Palace Jiwu Immortal Monarch, who rarely shows herself, appeared. The two immortal monarchs joined forces to fight that person. That battle could be said to be earth-shattering. Ever since the battle against the 1,000 Swords Demon Monarch, it has been many years since there was a huge battle. Almost half of the huge immortal city is in ruins. Even if an ordinary person wanted to help, they wouldn't be able to. Two immortal monarchs joined forces, and they let him escape? Huang Tian's face was full of disbelief. Yufeng shook his head slightly and said, he did escape, but with two immortal monarchs working together, it's not that easy. In addition, Immortal Monarch Night Owl was fighting with all his might. That person ran with injuries. Otherwise, with that person's ruthlessness, he wouldn't have retreated unless he had no other choice. Huang Tian narrowed his eyes and said, that's strange. Since he was no match for two immortal monarchs working together, why didn't they chase him? The entire continent is like a cage, and he was seriously injured. Where could he run to? Immortal Monarch Night Owl doesn't seem like someone who nurtures a tiger. Hee. You won't believe me even if I tell you. Yufeng's eyes were burning with passion as he lowered his voice and said, that person could actually enter and exit the heaven and earth formation at will. The two immortal monarchs were determined not to let him go, and they chased him all the way to the sky. Who knew that they would be stopped by the heaven and earth formation, and that person could directly pass through it, leaving them in the dust. That smell is very similar to the 1,000 Swords Demon Monarch back then. What? Huang Tian was dumbfounded. He can enter and exit the heaven and earth formation at will? How is that possible? He immediately thought of Yu Qianqiu, who was still trapped underground, and he already suspected if there was any connection between the two. Yufeng sneered and said, actually, in terms of cultivation, I'm afraid that person is no match for any immortal monarch. However, not only is his cultivation high, but he also seems to be able to borrow the power of heaven and earth. After he escaped from the Heaven and Earth Great Array, everyone understood that since the Heaven and Earth Great Array couldn't restrain him, he could fight to his heart's content, and didn't have to worry about the array taking away half of his immortal essence. Think about it. Immortal Monarch Night Owl consumes 20% of his celestial core power to unleash 10% of his power. But he can unleash 100% of his power with 100% of his power. How can Immortal Monarch Night Owl not be at a disadvantage when they fight? Hearing this, Huang Tian nodded vaguely. It seemed like he agreed, but in fact he didn't agree. How could accounts be calculated like this? Although it was a little disadvantageous and would affect the endurance of the fight, when it came to fighting, one could still unleash as much power as one had. It was just that the consumption of celestial core power would be doubled. Moreover, didn't the two immortal monarchs join forces in the end? Although he thought so, Yufeng seemed to be protecting the immortal monarch's face, so he couldn't say too much. After a moment of silence, he asked, why did this person barge into the celestial city? Is there something in the celestial city that he wants? Hearing this, Yufeng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, what does he want? He doesn't want anything. That person is a complete madman. The first time he came to the celestial city, he called out two immortal monarchs to fight him. Of course, the people below wouldn't be polite and immediately attacked. The second time he came again. With the previous lesson, Everyone could see that this person wasn't ordinary. Naturally, they weren't in a hurry to attack, because they couldn't keep fighting with him for no reason. They had to know the reason for the fight. So this time, someone asked him why he came to challenge the immortal monarchs, and what his intentions were. Guess what his answer was? Huang Tian was stunned and asked, "How did he answer?" That madman said, "He came to fight to lose, until he met an opponent that he couldn't surpass and died in battle. This was his lifelong wish, and he had no other wish." Yufeng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "Do you think this person is a madman? After so long he didn't have any intentions. He just came to the celestial city to fight the immortal monarchs. Say everyone has been idle for so many years. Don't those people who were beaten to death for no reason feel wronged?" Huang Tian was speechless. For someone like this who was purely seeking death for the sake of fighting, it wasn't wrong to say that he was a madman. Huang Tian was stunned and asked weakly. This time he escaped again. Will he come a third time? Come. Yufeng said unhappily. Before he escaped, he laughed loudly and said that it was satisfying, saying that this trip was not in vain. He even said to the two immortal monarchs that he would come again after he recovered. When the two immortal monarchs heard that he was going to come again, they felt a headache coming. For a madman like this who became stronger and stronger the more he fought, who was not afraid of fighting, who could bear to fight with him. Immortal monarch Night Owl has already gone to the underground world to contact the two netherworld generals. Chapter 760. Contact the two netherworld generals? Huang Tian was surprised. The two netherworld generals have not come out for a long time, and there has always been a barrier between them and the people of the immortal world. Can the immortal lord pull them out? Maybe not usually. Yufeng's eyes were burning. But don't forget, that madman can enter and exit the heaven and earth formation at will. As long as we capture that madman, we can unravel the secret of entering and exiting the formation. Do you think the two netherworld generals can resist such a huge temptation? If that madman dares to come again, the two immortal lords and the two netherworld generals can work together and subdue him. That's true. Huang Tian, who was nodding slightly, suddenly raised his eyebrows. His eyes flickered and he smiled. Brother Yufeng, please wait a moment. I just remembered something. I'll be back soon. Yufeng raised his hand and smiled. City Lord Huang is too polite. Please go ahead. Huang Tian cupped his hands and disappeared from the room in the tower. After returning to the City Lord Manor, Huang Tian casually walked towards a secluded corner of the garden. As he walked, his entire body suddenly sank into the ground. Inside the underground palace, Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting in front of a table with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. He stared at the walls of the underground palace in front of him. There was a ripple, and Huang Tian strolled out, giving off the feeling of an immortal passing through walls. What? You finally thought it through? Huang Tian walked over with a smile, revealing an expression that said, at least you're sensible. Yu Qianqiu sized him up, then leaned back on the chair and supported his chin with his hand. He said in a low voice, I've thought it through. I can't leave this continent sealed by the heaven and earth formation alone. So I need your help. In other words, I need to work with you. Huang Tian's smile froze and he frowned. Why don't I understand what you mean? It's very simple. Yu Qianqiu stood up and sighed. Believe it or not, I'll tell you the truth. I've been researching the mysteries of the heaven and earth formation. I spent a lot of time, and finally found a way to come in. However, if I want to leave, I'll need to spend more time researching. However, I'm very confident in my attainments and formations. Since I can come in, I can definitely get out. As long as we find the eye of the formation, getting out will be a piece of cake. Do you think I'll believe your nonsense? Huang Tian sneered and said, Actually, it's very simple for me to let you go. There's no need to spout nonsense. You just need to tell me how to leave. I promise I won't kill you. He had already thought it through. As long as he could get his hands on the method to leave, he could promise not to kill him. However, not killing him didn't mean that he couldn't cripple him. Damn it! Trying to play this game with me? Yu Qianqiu raised an eyebrow, his face full of mockery as he said, City Lord Huang, I think you're mistaken about one thing. If I really wanted to leave this place, I don't need your permission to let me go. Your mere underground palace can't trap me. The reason why I haven't left until today is that I've used these few days to think things through, and I feel that cooperating with you is the best choice. Oh, Huang Tian revealed a face full of mockery and said, Then I'd like to see how you can leave this place if I don't let you go. If you really have the ability to leave this underground palace, I'll agree to cooperate with you. He didn't believe that Yu Qianqiu would obediently stay here if he could leave this place. It seems that if I don't show some sincerity, City Lord Huang won't believe me at all. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sighed. I've always been a low-profile person and don't like to be ostentatious, but fine. Today I'll show off a little. It'll also let City Lord Huang know my sincerity in cooperating with you. Under Huang Tian's disdainful gaze, this guy looked around and stretched out a hand, pointing at the place Huang Tian had just come out from. The earthen wall on the opposite side melted away like snow, revealing a pitch-black hole that was 2 meters wide and wide enough for a person to pass through. City Lord Huang, do you believe me now? Yu Qianqiu asked with a deadpan expression. Huang Tian was completely dumbfounded. In the end, Yu Qianqiu shook his head and muttered to himself, Not saying anything. That means you don't believe me. Fine. He stretched out his hand again, and with 2 fingers he pointed to the east, then to the west, then to the left, then to the right. In short, he randomly pointed to the front, back, left, right, up, down, and down. In the blink of an eye, the underground palace was filled with holes, and the underground palace couldn't be considered an underground palace anymore. It was completely an underground hub that connected in all directions. After finishing his work, Yu Qianqiu put his hands behind his back and asked with a face full of mockery, City Lord Huang, which hole do you think I should leave from? Huang Tian was flabbergasted. After a while he asked, So you also know how to control Earth? I've always been a low-profile person. There's no need to mention this. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand apologetically, as if it was just a small trick that wasn't worth mentioning. Huang Tian was speechless. Then he asked with a complicated expression, "How do you want to cooperate?" He suddenly felt like he was fooling himself. After seeing Yu Qianqiu's methods, he completely believed in Yu Qianqiu's sincerity. Otherwise, Yu Qianqiu could really leave at any time. There was no need to wait for him. Yu Qianqiu waved his sleeve, and all the holes in the underground palace instantly closed up, returning to normal. He said solemnly, "Let's work together and find the formation core. As long as we find it, I'll be able to think of a way to leave." Huang Tian looked at the underground palace that had returned to normal and said, "This formation was set up by the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch. I'm afraid no one knows where the formation core is. Even if we want to find it, it's easier said than done in such a vast continent. Don't you have someone like me who's proficient in formations?" Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and said, "According to my experience, the heaven-earth formation is so powerful, so it needs a powerful energy to support its operation. I'm sure that the powerful energy supporting the heaven-earth formation is the formation core. As long as we find where the powerful energy is, we'll have a way to leave this place. Think about it. Where can we find the powerful energy supporting the heaven-earth formation?" The powerful energy supporting the heaven-earth formation? Huang Tian frowned and suddenly exclaimed, "Purple flames! Could the purple flames be the formation core?" Finally, the main topic. Yu Qianqiu was secretly happy when he heard that. "Luckily, you're not completely clueless, or else I'll have to slowly guide you." However, he asked with an ignorant expression, "Purple flames? What's purple flames?" Huang Tian immediately explained the true Samadhi fire in detail. Yu Qianqiu listened patiently, and immediately clapped his hands and cheered. "That's right, that's it. There's no doubt about it. The purple flames are the formation core. Do you have a way to find it? As long as we find it, we'll be able to leave this broken place." Huang Tian pursed his lips and nodded excitedly. Since the purple flames are the formation core, it's easy now that we have a target. We won't have to search aimlessly. Maybe we'll have to spend some time to ask around, but we'll definitely find it. After all, the purple flames aren't ordinary. The target is no small matter. As long as it's shown, someone will definitely know. I've heard people mention it before, but I didn't pay much attention to it. I didn't expect it to be the formation core. Hearing someone mention the purple flames, Yu Qianqiu's body trembled. He walked over and grabbed Huang Tian's arm. He said anxiously, "Who mentioned it? Quickly go and ask him." "Don't pull and pull." Huang Tian pushed his hand away and paced around. He said sadly, "That person offended Immortal Lord Night Owl, and was killed by Immortal Lord Night Owl." F***ck. Yu Qianqiu almost choked to death. What nonsense! Huang Tian saw that he wasn't faking his anxiety, and nodded in his heart. It seemed that the purple flames were indeed the formation core. He comforted him. "Don't worry. I also want to leave this place as soon as possible. Don't worry. As long as the target is locked onto the heaven and earth universe formation, there will definitely be more than one person who has seen it. I'll find a way to find out about the purple flames as soon as possible." Yu Qianqiu calmed down a little, and began to ponder whether he should think of a way to leak the news that he could leave the heaven and earth Great Qingquan formation. Old Huang's ability seemed to be limited. He should be able to find the purple flames faster with the help of the immortal monarchs of the eastern and western palaces. Huang Tian's heart trembled slightly when he saw Yu Qianqiu's gaze drifting about. He narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Yu Qianqiu, since you and I have agreed to cooperate, I hope no one else knows about this." His tone concealed a hint of threat. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Don't worry about this. I have quite a reputation outside, and am doing very well. I don't want all the masters here to go out and join in the fun. The world can't accommodate so many great gods. City Lord Huang, on the other hand, you have to be careful when you find the purple flames. I know what I'm doing. You don't have to worry about it." Huang Tian paused and suddenly said, "Speaking of the outside, I thought of something. I don't know if you know this person. This person can actually ignore the heaven and earth Qianquan formation. He immediately repeated what Yufeng had said. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He didn't need to guess to know that it must be that amazing master of his. Who else could it be other than him? This old man was as monstrous as ever. The more he played, the bigger he got. He hoped that he didn't kill himself. But then again, worrying for him was unnecessary. The old man insisted on walking the path of terror, and no one could stop him. After thinking about it, he shook his head and said, "I've never heard of such an expert in the world." Huang Tian nodded and said, "I also feel that it's impossible for there to be such an expert in the world. Maybe he's a rising star in the celestial world." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, "Let's not talk about him. Let's talk about me first. My native friends are still in prison. Why don't you find a reason to release them and give us a free identity?" Huang Tian nodded to indicate that he would arrange it. Yu Qianqiu looked around and said, "You should keep this underground palace. If there's anything, we'll meet here. Let's just say it like this. I'll go to prison first. Quickly release us. I'm leaving." After saying that, he dashed into the mud wall and disappeared. Huang Tian's face twitched. This underground palace really couldn't trap him. Chapter 761. In the dungeon, as soon as Yu Qianqiu appeared, Immortal Lord Crocodile immediately transmitted his voice to him. "Did you find Huang Tian?" Yu Qianqiu did not disturb the others. He quietly lay down beside him and replied with a voice transmission, "It's done. We will be able to leave in no time." "You killed his men. He didn't make things difficult for you?" Immortal Lord Crocodile asked curiously. "You're worrying too much. There's nothing I can't handle. This is what it means to be capable." Yu Qianqiu lay down on a pile of straw and crossed his legs. The two of them chatted casually. Sure enough, after waiting for a while, the sound of the metal door opening came from outside. The footsteps were getting closer and closer. After the door of the cell was opened, under the dim light, someone shouted at the door, "All of you come out." Bolly and the others hurriedly stood up and walked out. The guard scolded them a few times and led them outside. Once out of the dungeon, Bolly and the others felt that the sunlight was blinding because they had stayed in the dark for too long. In the courtyard outside the dungeon stood a few soldiers in bright armor. They were obviously of a higher grade than the guards here. A man with a dignified aura slowly sized them up. After that he asked in a deep voice, "Who is Yu Qianqiu?" "I am." Yu Qianqiu, who was the smallest among them, stood out. The man looked at him meaningfully and said in a relaxed tone, "You can go out, but you have been stripped of your right to participate in the fence gathering. Without permission, you cannot leave La City." Bolly and the others looked at each other and kept quiet. They were obviously a little afraid. To them, the city guards were people they had to look up to. Yu Qianqiu frowned. This must be Huang Tian's order. He did not know what the old man meant. Was there any meaning in doing this? Immortal Lord Crocodile said impatiently, "Can we go now?" With his pride, if it was not to cooperate with Yu Qianqiu, he would not stay in a place like this to be scolded. The man didn't get angry and nodded without changing his expression. Immortal Crocodile was the first to leave. Yu Qianqiu smiled and waved at Bolly and the rest. Let's go. It's fine now." He guessed that these guys must have been living in fear for the past few days. The man with the dignified aura silently watched them leave, and his expression seemed to be deep in thought. The sacred palace of Baiwan country, which was hidden in the deep mountains and beautiful rivers, was pure white and smooth like jade. Under the illumination of the sun, it radiated a warm light. It was symmetrical with the surrounding mountain scenery, like a piece of jade embedded in the mountain, with the mountains on one side and the water on the other. It was holy and pure. The air outside was fresh and green, with birds chirping and flowers blooming everywhere. In front of the white jade railings of the temple stood Wen Lanfeng in a plain gray robe. The color of his robe reflected his mood. The pleasant scenery could not dispel the faint melancholy in his eyes. The plain gray robe, the slender figure, and the melancholy eyes stood there quietly, looking extremely lonely. He had been standing here for a long time, and no one dared to disturb him. The peerless beauty of Lingfang Valley still lingered in his dreams. His infatuation had not wavered for countless years. On the flowering path outside, a man calmly walked over and bowed to the dazed Wen Lanfeng. Elder ancestor. Wen Lanfeng slowly came back to his senses and smiled faintly. It's Wen Rui. What's the matter? What's the matter? Wen Rui smiled and reported. It's like this. There's someone outside who wants to see you. I can't chase him away, so I'm here to ask for your permission. Oh. Wen Lanfeng frowned slightly. Who wants to see me? Wen Rui muttered. I don't know if it's true or not. He claims to be Yan Juexing, but I don't think so. Yan Juexing? Wen Lanfeng's eyes instantly turned sharp. He asked in a low voice, where is he? Yan Juexing had taken away Lu Yanqing's disciple, Xan Laosan, which worried Lu Yanqing. How could he not care about it? He's waiting by the heart-cleansing lake. Before Wen Rui finished his words, Wen Lanfeng had already turned into a shadow and flew away. Wen Rui immediately followed him. In the depths of the jungle, the heart-cleansing lake was as calm as a mirror, reflecting the blue sky and white clouds. From time to time, various kinds of birds flew by. There were pavilions built by the lake, which were the residences for receiving guests. Mist curled up from the lake, setting off the scenery here like a fairyland on earth. A black-robed man stood by the lake. His silky black hair was draped over his shoulders, covering half of his face. He was expressionless as he watched the fish swimming leisurely in the lake. No one knew what he was thinking. Two figures landed behind him, one in front and one behind. He continued to stare at the lake silently. Wen Lanfeng was slightly startled when he saw the black-robed man. He had seen Yan Juexing before. At that time, Yan Juexing's cultivation was only at the early stage of crossing calamity. But this man's cultivation was clearly at the early stage of soul formation. Wen Lanfeng stared at the back of the black-robed man and said in a low voice, Who are you? Why did you pretend to be Yan Juexing and trick me to come out to meet you? Do you think I have a good temper? How would I dare to lie to you, senior one? I'm afraid you're forgetful. The unmoving black-robed man finally turned around slowly. His long black hair fluttered even though there was no wind. It was Yan Juexing's true appearance. You. Wen Lanfeng was shocked. He had seen Yan Juexing before. This man's appearance was indeed Yan Juexing's, but he could not be wrong about his cultivation. He quickly stared at Yan Juexing's left hand. He remembered Lu Yanqing saying that Yan Juexing's left hand had been chopped off by Yu Qianqiu, and this man's left hand was intact. Lu Yanqing would definitely not lie to him. You're definitely not Yan Juexing. Who are you? Wen Lanfeng shouted. He was really angry. Someone actually dared to trick him in front of him. No matter how good his temper was, he could not hold it in anymore. Yan Juexing slowly raised his left hand and said coldly, Senior Wen must be wondering why my hand, which was chopped off by Yu Qianqiu, is still here, right? Yes, it was once chopped off by Yu Qianqiu, but it grew back. And my cultivation must be very strange to you, right? Actually, life is full of miracles. There's nothing strange about it. What he said was all the doubts in Wen Lanfeng's heart, but such an answer did not satisfy Wen Lanfeng. Wen Lanfeng still doubted. Are you really Yan Juexing? Yan Juexing shook his head slightly and said, I thought Senior Wen would have a better vision. I didn't expect you to be so mediocre. I'm really disappointed. Isn't Senior Wen on good terms with Yu Qianqiu? You must have heard him mention that I'm cultivating demonic arts. He stared at his left hand coldly and said indifferently, It's all thanks to the demonic arts that I can stand here today. Wen Lanfeng's pupil shrank. Even if the other party was really Yan Juexing, his attitude towards him was too calm. Did he think that he was a match for him, just because his cultivation had reached the early stage of soul formation? Wen Lanfeng snorted and said, So you're really Yan Juexing? Yan Juexing put down his left hand and nodded slightly. Yes. Moreover, impersonating Yan Juexing won't do me any good. It will even make Senior Wen unhappy. Why would I do that? After confirming Yan Juexing's identity, Wen Lanfeng ignored the miracle that happened to him, because he did not feel that it had anything to do with him. He immediately shouted, Where's Third Xian? Third Xian? Yan Juexing said indifferently. It seems that the rumor in the cultivation world is true. Senior Wen has long fallen for the world's most beautiful woman. If there's a chance, I'd like to see how beautiful the so-called world's most beautiful woman is to be able to make Senior Wen fall in love with her. I'll ask you for the last time, where's Third Excion? When Lanfeng's eyes turned cold, and his body exuded a faint killing intent, Yan Juexing shook his head slightly and said without fear, Senior Wen, please answer my question first. If I'm satisfied, I'm willing to return Third Excion to Senior Lu. Otherwise, don't even think about knowing where Third Excion is even if you kill me. When Lanfeng clenched his fists and said in a deep voice, Speak. Senior Wen and Yu Qianqiu's relationship is not ordinary. I believe Senior Wen must know where Yu Qianqiu is. Yan Juexing's black robe and long hair suddenly fluttered without any wind. He asked word by word, I want to know where Yu Qianqiu is. When Lanfeng was slightly stunned, it was obvious that Yan Juexing wanted to find Yu Qianqiu for revenge. With Yan Juexing's current cultivation, he was afraid that Yu Qianqiu would have a hard time. Moreover, it was impossible for him to tell Yan Juexing that Yu Qianqiu was Niu Yid. He paused and said, Hand over Third Excion, and I can let you go today. Yan Juexing's eyes lit up and he sneered. It seems that Senior Wen knows where Yu Qianqiu is. You just don't want to say it. If that's the case, I won't force you. I believe I can find other people who know. Goodbye. Just when he was about to turn around, he heard Wen Lanfeng shout, Stop. Do you think you can leave today? Oh. Yan Juexing stopped and shook his head. That's not necessarily true. You don't have the ability, but you have the guts. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Today, I will let you know what is certain. Just when Wen Lanfeng was about to make a move, he suddenly felt a slight movement behind him. He thought that Wen Rui was going to attack on his behalf. Unexpectedly, he felt a chill in his chest. An ice-cold sword had already pierced through his chest. Wen Lanfeng stretched out 2 fingers at lightning speed to clamp the sword's edge to prevent it from moving and causing him more serious injuries. He suddenly looked back and saw that the person who sneak attacked him was none other than Wen Rui, who was standing behind him. He was desperately urging the sword in his hand to kill him. At this moment, Wen Lanfeng's mood was no less than being struck by lightning. He only felt cold all over and roared, Wen Rui, you bastard! The difference in their cultivation was too big. Wen Lanfeng's impressive cultivation was not child's play. When Wen Rui saw that his sword was caught between Wen Lanfeng's 2 fingers, and he was unable to move it even after exerting all his cultivation, he was immediately shocked. He immediately abandoned his sword and flashed over, swinging his palm towards the top of Wen Lanfeng's head. Looking at this move, it was obvious that he wanted to kill Wen Lanfeng in one blow. Chapter 762. Wen Lanfeng had never dreamed of such a day. Since he stepped into the cultivation world, he had been prepared to die a horrible death. However, he had never thought that the Wen family wanted to kill him, especially Wen Rui, who had no chance to step into the soul formation stage without his strong support. Otherwise, Wen Rui would not be able to hurt him even if he had a little bit of defense. How could he vent his anger? Wen Lanfeng's face was full of grief and indignation. With 2 fingers, he broke the sword that had pierced through his chest. He swung his arm, and a cold glare shot out. It carried the force of thunder, and it was as fast as lightning. It was even faster than the person who attacked him, and with a bang, it struck Wen Rui's chest, causing a splash of blood. Puff! Wen Rui spat out a mouthful of blood. The momentum of the broken sword was like a heavy hammer hitting his chest. When the cold light pierced through his chest, he was shocked and flew out by a huge force. Yan Juexing turned into a shadow and rushed over almost at the same time as Wen Lanfeng's attack. Wen Lanfeng's murderous aura suddenly appeared like a whirlwind. He stared at Wen Rui, who was sent flying, and slapped the exposed half of the broken sword on his chest without turning his head. The flowing light shot out from his back with a spurting blood sword. The sound of wind and thunder rose again, and violently shot toward Yan Juexing. The sharp aura of the broken blade arrived in an instant, like a frosty blade sweeping over. Yan Juexing was shocked. Wen Lanfeng was indeed Wen Lanfeng. His cultivation was much higher than Bing Qingzi's. He was a little overconfident and overestimated himself. Just the power of the broken sword alone was not something he could withstand. In a flash of thought, Yan Juexing's afterimage split into 3 phantasms like black smoke. The broken blade passed through the 3 phantasms, almost at the moment when the 3 phantasms separated. It hit the heart-cleansing lake and made a huge splash. Yan Juexing was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. Even though he had escaped this fatal blow, the sprayed blood was like a rainstorm and instantly covered the 3 wisps of black smoke that could not escape in time. The crackling sounds were like beans being fried, causing the 3 wisps of black smoke to tremble like curtains. They were forcefully separated into 3 arcs that converged into a shape in the air. Yan Juexing looked a little embarrassed when he reappeared. His black robe was full of small holes, and a few strands of black hair were scattered on the lake. This was just the appearance. His skin under the black robe was painful and numb, as if being pricked by thousands of needles. If his demonic body was not strong, he would have been beaten into a sieve. Yan Juexing clenched his fists in the air, and the bones all over his body cracked. Black evil spirit instantly gushed out from his body and lingered around him. Yan Juexing, with his long hair fluttering in the wind, slowly raised his head. His cold gaze shifted from his own body to Wen Lanfeng. He said indifferently, "Senior Wen is indeed worthy of your reputation." This was not a compliment. Yan Juexing thought that when Rue's sneak attack first, and he would succeed with his demonic skills. But who knew that Wen Lanfeng was as immovable as a mountain? With just a raise of his hand, he immediately forced the 2 into an embarrassing situation. One of them was seriously injured. When Rue was still struggling in the ruins of the wooden building that he had crashed into. However, he seemed to be injured too badly. He shook his dizzy head and could not stand up for a long time. When Lanfeng stared at him with a sorrowful expression on his face, he allowed the blood to flow from his chest and back. The blood that flowed out formed strange patterns on his gray robe, giving the illusion that his robe had been torn apart. No matter how much blood flowed, it could not drain the sorrow in his heart. He really could not think of any way that he had wronged Wen Rue. When Lanfeng pointed a finger at his chest and channeled his strength through his meridians, immediately stopping the bleeding on his chest and back. His long but somewhat bleak body suddenly turned around and stared at Yan Juexing angrily. "Ignorant junior, don't even think of leaving today. Leave your life here." Yan Juexing was waiting for him to turn around and look at him. He immediately grasped the opportunity and shouted in a deep voice, "Look at my demon eye." His eyes suddenly glowed with a demonic red light and directly looked at Wen Lanfeng's stare. Wen Lanfeng's expression slightly stiffened, but in the blink of an eye, his eyes suddenly glowed and he shouted angrily, "Crooked Way, how dare you act wildly in front of me? Today I must eliminate you, you scourge." His loud and clear voice was deafening, surging layer by layer. Yan Juexing showed a pained expression. The demonic red light in his eyes suddenly disappeared. With a flick of his long hair, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Wen Lanfeng's cultivation was profound, and his primordial spirit was as strong as steel. It was not someone that Yan Juexing could cross levels to capture. As a result, he suffered a backlash and injured himself. In fact, the demonic book had long warned that when facing an opponent with a certain level of cultivation, one should not use demon eye ecstasy lightly. Otherwise, one could easily suffer a backlash. Within a certain level of cultivation, it could be used to cross levels, because the primordial spirits in this level were relatively light and easy to capture. After this level, as the opponent's primordial spirit had stabilized, it could at most be used on people of the same level. The higher the level, the more stable the primordial spirit was, and the harder it was to control. In the end, one could only control people with a lower level of cultivation. If one encountered a cultivator with attainments in the primordial spirit, one had to be extra careful, even if their cultivation was lower. Otherwise, one might be controlled by the other party. This was the fatal weakness of demon eye ecstasy. But then again, if one could control it regardless of the level of cultivation, the world would have long been the world of demonic cultivators. It was not that Yan Juexing did not know this, but because of the improvement of his cultivation, and the fact that he had injured Bing Qingzi with a punch, he was indeed a little overconfident. As a result, he suffered a loss in the hands of Wen Lanfeng. As the saying goes, there must be a gain for every loss. After suffering a loss, he would remember the lesson. At this moment, a silver light suddenly flashed out from the storage bag on Wen Lanfeng's waist. The sword moved along with his finger. When Lanfeng waved his arm and pointed, the giant silver sword did not stop at all. With the momentum of a thunderbolt, it stirred up layers of almost substantial air waves and burst out. In this blow, Wen Lanfeng did not hold back any strength. He wanted to kill Yan Juexing. The monstrous momentum rushed like a cannon. The silver light in the middle shocked Yan Juexing, who was shaken. He immediately teleported to avoid it without thinking. However, just when he appeared hundreds of meters away, he could immediately hear the roar that broke through the air. Yan Juexing slightly tilted his head and was immediately scared out of his wits. The giant silver sword almost followed him at the same time. It was frighteningly fast, and he immediately teleported to avoid it. When Lanfeng stood by the lake in a blood-stained gray robe, his eyes followed Yan Juexing, who was dodging. He was completely determined to kill Yan Juexing. How could he easily escape? The lake water beside the heart-cleansing lake suddenly rippled and was pushed away layer by layer. Each wave was higher than the previous one. Just when Lanfeng's momentum soared, and he wanted to fly to the sky to deal with Yan Juexing, there was a flapping sound in the ruins of the wooden building behind him. When Lanfeng suddenly turned back, he saw Wen Rui's eyes were about to crack. He coughed out mouthfuls of blood and seemed to be madly rushing over. Bastard. When Lanfeng shouted angrily, he was immediately furious. He raised his palm with surging momentum wrapped in murderous intent. With Wen Rui's current weak body, he would probably immediately lose his life if he were to use this palm. However, when Wen Lanfeng's eyes met Wen Rui's unprecedented tyrannical eyes, he immediately remembered the moment when Yan Juexing wanted to control him with the magic eye. He instantly understood why Wen Rui sneak attacked him. He dodged sideways to avoid Wen Rui, who was knocked down, and pointed two fingers on Wen Rui's back. The finger's strength easily penetrated Wen Rui's meridians, and Wen Rui immediately collapsed to the ground. At this moment, there was a sharp whistling sound in the air. When Lanfeng suddenly looked over and saw a flowing light get rid of the giant silver sword at an incredible speed. Want to run? When Lanfeng snorted coldly, he had disappeared. He teleported 3 times in the air and instantly caught up with Yan Juexing. He waved his fist and directly punched. Leave your life here. The strong wind blew wildly in the air with astonishing momentum. Yan Juexing looked back and was immediately scared out of his wits. When Lanfeng had already swung his fist in front of him with a face full of anger. At this time, Yan Juexing had no choice but to fight. He used all his cultivation and shouted, "Magic fist!" Boom! There was a loud sound in the air, and the airwave collapsed. Yan Juexing made a puff sound and spat out another mouthful of blood. He was directly thrown far away by the powerful impact. However, he could not care about anything at this time. The only priority was to escape. With the help of the powerful impact, he took advantage of the magic light glimpse movement technique to the extreme and fled into the sky like a flowing light. He looked back from time to time, afraid that Wen Lanfeng would catch up again. Wen Lanfeng stopped in the air and watched Yan Juexing escape. His eyes were filled with disbelief. The penetrating and explosive force contained in Yan Juexing's punch was so strong that Wen Lanfeng could not believe that the punch was made by Yan Juexing. In fact, at this time, it was not that he did not want to chase Yan Juexing again, but the true vitality in his body was extremely chaotic. He had a faint feeling that he could not condense it. It seemed that the power of Yan Juexing's punch was still reverberating in his body. At this time, the penetrating wound on his chest and back was gurgling blood again. Unfortunately, Yan Juexing, who was busy running for his life, did not see this scene. Otherwise, he should be able to more or less see that Wen Lanfeng had almost lost the ability to fight at this time. If he could take the opportunity while he had not recovered, he would definitely be able to avenge the hatred of Lingfang Valley. After a long time, Wen Lanfeng, who stopped in the air, finally recovered. He pointed a finger at his chest and the bleeding on his chest and back was stopped again. At this time, Wen Lanfeng's face was a little pale, which was related to the excessive blood loss. However, with his cultivation, it was not fatal. Staring at the direction where Yan Juexing disappeared, Wen Lanfeng shook his head slightly and sighed. He knew that he had missed the opportunity, and it was useless to chase. As soon as he turned around, he saw a group of Wen family disciples flying over. These disciples, who were cultivating in seclusion, were obviously awakened by the movement of the fight, and came out of seclusion. Wen Lanfeng did not say a word, and directly flew past them to the lakeside to carry Wen Rui back. The Wen family disciples, who were so shocked that they forgot to salute, took a long time to react. They looked at each other in disbelief. They actually saw the elder ancestor injured. It was really hard to believe that someone could injure the elder ancestor. Chapter 763. In the boundless mountains, a shadow suddenly fell from the sky. Yan Juexing, who was fleeing in panic, quickly dodged through the dense forest. He found a hidden cave in a sorry state and directly entered it. Who knew that there were two big gray wolves, one male and one female, lying inside. The two wolves were shocked, and before they could do anything, Yan Juexing punched them into a bloody mess without hesitation. He then turned around and hid in the cave covered by grass and trees, carefully watching the surroundings. He was still in the territory of Baiwan country, but he really did not dare to run anymore. Once Wen Lanfeng caught up with him, in terms of speed, he was frightened by the scene of Wen Lanfeng chasing him. In addition, the demonic aura in his body was almost exhausted. He could not run far even if he wanted to, so he had to find a hidden place to hide. After confirming that no one was chasing him, Yan Juexing's nervousness was somewhat relieved. He looked around the barren mountains. What a familiar scene! What a déjà vu! Yan Juexing sat on the ground, helplessness and desolation surging on his face. He was fleeing in panic in the barren mountains again. This was not the first or second time. Was this his fate? Yan Juexing inserted his hands into the soil. He did not expect Wen Lanfeng to be so strong. After being successfully attacked by Wen Rui, he did not even have a chance to get close to Wen Lanfeng. Based on his current cultivation, the demonic skill he cultivated could only exert its power in close combat. But even if he could get close to Wen Lanfeng, the demonic fists that he exerted with all his strength still could not hurt Wen Lanfeng. Instead, he was injured again. He did not expect that Bing Qingzi's cultivation was so different from Wen Lanfeng's. He could hurt Bing Qingzi with 60% of his strength, but he could not hurt Wen Lanfeng with 100% of his strength. Yan Juexing was speechless, regretting that he did not listen to Bing Qingzi's words, and only came out after mastering the demonic skill. He did not think that Bing Qingzi did not expect that Yan Juexing would hurt him at all. Moreover, Yan Juexing was purely resisting and did not fight back at all. If Bing Qingzi really wanted to kill Yan Juexing would not be any better. After all, an expert at the late stage of soul transformation was not to be trifled with. No, Yan Juexing jumped up with a swoosh. His movement was too violent and affected his internal injuries. He immediately bent over and pressed his chest, choking a mouthful of blood. After he slowly straightened his body, his face was filled with anger and unwillingness. As he gritted his teeth, he was actually so angry that he was trembling. Now that he had calmed down, he recalled the punch that collided with Wen Lanfeng. When he was escaping, he looked back and saw that Wen Lanfeng's chest was bleeding. In other words, his punch was effective. Thinking about why Wen Lanfeng didn't chase after him. Wen Lanfeng had proven that he had the ability to kill him. So why did he stop there and watch him escape? It was obvious that Wen Lanfeng had lost the ability to chase after him. Once he figured it out, Yan Juexing immediately felt like his heart was being stabbed by a knife. He understood that he had missed the most crucial opportunity. Return now. This was impossible. With Wen Lanfeng's ability, with this period of time as a buffer, not to mention recovering from his injuries, he would at least have the ability to fight again. After fighting with him, Wen Lanfeng must have understood the power of his devil fist. If he went back to fight, it would be impossible for Wen Lanfeng to fight him in close combat. A flying sword with unparalleled power could take his life. Cough, cough. Yan Juexing coughed violently and spat out mouthfuls of blood. This was due to his anger, which aggravated his injuries. He covered his chest and looked at the blood on the ground. His gaze slowly recovered its indifference. Under the dazzling red, he gradually calmed down. His indifferent eyes stared outside the cave. Since his demonic fist had injured Wen Lanfeng, it meant that he still had a chance for revenge. Wen Lanfeng, you have so many weaknesses. It won't be too long before we meet again. Yan Juexing gritted his teeth and sat down cross-legged. He took out a panacea and began to adjust his breath to restore his body. This was the most important thing at the moment. In the sacred hall of the Wen family, Wen Lanfeng's personal meditation place was empty and quiet. In the corner, Wen Rui, who was chained up, lay there quietly. Although he was unconscious, Wen Lanfeng had personally sealed his dantian, making it impossible for him to use his cultivation. His serious injuries had also been healed by Wen Lanfeng with his profound cultivation. There was a chance for him to recover slowly. Wen Lanfeng was sitting cross-legged opposite him, healing himself. A few days later, Wen Lanfeng slowly opened his eyes. Although his injuries had not healed, they were no longer a problem. He calmly looked at Wen Rui in the corner, without the slightest anger in his eyes. It was not Wen Rui's intention to sneak attack him. He was controlled by Yan Juexing. After understanding this, he could only think about how to help Wen Rui completely get rid of Yan Juexing's control. He got up and walked to the unconscious Wen Rui. Wen Lanfeng looked at the person on the ground and could not help but sigh. Yanqing, we were all wrong. Yu Qianqiu was right. He remembered the scene in the cornucopia. At that time, Yu Qianqiu was determined to kill Yan Juexing and Hu Changshou's son, Hu Yuntian. It was he who listened to Lu Yanqing and stopped him. Otherwise, with that guy's courage to do anything, it was very likely that he would have killed Yan Juexing. There would not have been the disaster of Lingfang Valley and the disaster of Heart Cleansing Lake. However, it was too late to say anything now. Maybe he had caused big trouble for Yu Qianqiu. Yan Juexing would definitely not let him go. Wen Lanfeng shook his head slightly and felt a little regretful. He helped Wen Rui up on the spot to see if he could help him get rid of Yan Juexing's control. On both sides of the road leading to Lingfang Valley, there were stone tablets singing praises of Lingfang Valley for saving the world and saving people. The word pious was written on the faces of the people who came and went. That was the respect for Lingfang Valley from the bottom of their hearts. However, there was one person who did not seem to fit in with the crowd. Nobody noticed when he appeared among the passers-by. This person was wearing a black robe and walking slowly. His long black hair was draped over his shoulders. Half of his face was covered by his long hair, while the other half of his face looked unusually cold. The gaze that he revealed was as calm as stagnant water. Whether it was his temperament or attire, he was different from ordinary people. The passers-by who came and went could not help but look at him. However, they would subconsciously stay away from him. Because they were too close to each other, they felt a bone-chilling coldness, as if they weren't approaching a human, but a block of ice in the winter. After entering Lingfang Valley, one could immediately smell the medicinal fragrance. The surrounding scenery was quiet, and the vegetation was lush and green. There were many unknown small flowers in the medicine fields on both sides of the valley. When the breeze blew, they would sway shyly, appearing small and delicate. The long-haired man in black raised his head and looked at the two big words medicine hut on the opposite mountain. Then, he followed the passers-by into the long row of spirit hut, where patients were treated. The spirit hut was crude, but it did not lose its elegance. Even though the four sides were hollow and ventilated, the medicinal fragrance was far richer than the outside. After the long-haired man in black looked around coldly, he silently sat on the bench with the others and waited in line. Chapter 764. However, no one was willing to sit close to him. His left and right sides became empty, which was not harmonious with the surrounding atmosphere. All of a sudden, he became extremely conspicuous in the abode. It was hard not to be noticed by the disciples of Lingfang Valley. The disciples of Lingfang Valley, who were busy in the abode, all looked at him. Someone walked to his side and looked at him suspiciously. "Are you here to see a doctor?" Yan Juexing did not even look at him. He shook his head slightly and said, "I'm here to deliver a message." "Message?" That person was taken aback and asked in astonishment, "What message?" "Third brother Xian asked me to deliver the message," Yan Juexing said lightly. The ordinary people at the side naturally didn't know what he was talking about. But how could the disciples of Spirit Fang Valley not know who third brother Xian was? When they heard what he said, they quickly walked over and stared at him. But no one could see through his cultivation. The person immediately asked, "What message did third brother Xian ask you to deliver?" "Are you ninth brother Xian?" Yan Juexing looked at him and said lightly, "Third brother Xian told me that I can only tell ninth brother Xian." Lingfang Valley was almost turned upside down because of third brother Xian and his brothers. The person naturally knew that it was not a trivial matter. He looked around the ordinary people, who were staring at them curiously, and frowned. He immediately smiled and cupped his hands at Yan Juexing. "It must be hard for you to come all the way here to deliver the message. Please follow me to the back of the mountain. I have some good tea to quench your thirst." Yan Juexing said lightly, "It's okay. I'm not thirsty. It's good here. I'll wait for ninth brother Xian here." The disciple of Lingfang Valley hesitated for a while, and then whispered to the person beside him, "Quickly go and ask ninth uncle master to come." The person beside him immediately ran out of the abode. The person then asked with a smile, "I haven't asked for your name yet. I wonder if you can tell me?" However, Yan Juexing did not speak anymore. He sat there stiffly and looked straight, as if he did not hear anything. The person was a little embarrassed, but he could not say anything. He could only wait for ninth brother Xian. Of course, he was also guarding. Since this person knew about third brother Xian, he could not let him go. Not long after, a tall and thin man in gray quickly ran into the abode. It was ninth brother Xian. The crowd parted to let him in. The disciple who answered before immediately pointed. "Ninth uncle master, that's him." Old ninth Xian sized him up, and his pupils shrank. He discovered that this person was actually at the early stage of soul formation. However, in the cultivation world, anyone who could reach the soul formation stage was not a nobody. But he had never seen this person before. Yan Juexing tilted his head and looked at him. He slowly stood up and said indifferently, "You're ninth Xian?" Because the two of them had never met before, they didn't know each other. Xian Laojiu cupped his hands and said, "I am indeed Xian Laojiu. I heard that you are here on behalf of my third brother. Is this true?" "Of course. Otherwise I wouldn't have come all the way here," Yan Juexing said calmly. Ninth brother Xian got the confirmation and became anxious. However, when he saw the ordinary people around, he immediately waved his hand and said, "Please move to the back of the mountain. We can talk slowly." "No need. If you have anything to say it here." Yan Juexing refused. Ninth brother Xian was stunned. He looked at the crowd again and forced a smile. "Then I will follow you." "Oh right, I haven't asked for your name?" Yan Juexing stared at him and slowly said word by word, "Yan Juexing." When he said that, all the disciples of Lingfang Valley were shocked, as if they were facing a great enemy. Ninth brother Xian clenched his fist so tightly that there was an explosive sound. However, he was immediately stunned as if he had noticed something wrong. He sized up Yan Juexing again and said in a deep voice, "Who exactly are you? Why did you come to my Lingfang Valley to seek pleasure?" As far as he knew, Yan Juexing was only in the early stage of tribulation passing. Moreover, one of his arms was chopped off by Yu Qianqiu. The characteristics of this person couldn't match with Yan Juexing at all. How could it be Yan Juexing? Therefore, he concluded that this person came to Lingfang Valley to make trouble. "What do you think I can gain by coming to Lingfang Valley to pretend to be Yan Juexing?" Yan Juexing snorted. His eyes suddenly glowed with a demonic red light and locked onto ninth brother Xian's eyes. Ninth brother Xian's expression instantly became dull. The surrounding people only felt that the red light was dazzling. When the red light disappeared, they looked at Yan Juexing in horror, as if they had seen a monster. They all retreated and knocked over many things. The disciples of Lingfang Valley also stared at Yan Juexing inexplicably. They didn't know what was going on with the red light that burst out from his eyes. Yan Juexing suddenly raised his finger and pointed at the disciple of Lingfang Valley, who was talking to him before, and said, "Kill him." Ninth Brother Xian's dull expression instantly came back to life. Without hesitation, he struck the disciple beside him with his palm. That disciple never thought that Ninth Brother Xian would sneak attack him. He didn't even have the thought of dodging. Immediately, he let out a shrill scream and died on the spot. Yan Juexing nodded his head in satisfaction. However, the surrounding people were terrified. Murder! Suddenly, screams could be heard from all directions. They rushed out of the abode and scrambled out of the valley. The disciples of Lingfang Valley were also terrified. They rushed out of the abode in a flash, afraid that they would be implicated by Ninth Brother Xian. In an instant, Lingfang Valley was in a mess. People were screaming and running everywhere. Inside the abode, Ninth Brother Xian stood beside Yan Juexing expressionlessly. Yan Juexing glanced at him, and a smile appeared on his calm face. Things went smoother than he had imagined. He had long heard that the people of Lingfang Valley cared about their reputation under the guidance of Lu Yanqing. They definitely wouldn't fight with him in front of mortals. Therefore, he blended in with the mortals and brazenly broke into Lingfang Valley. This method seemed easy to expose, but in fact, it was safer than sneak attacks. If he sneaked in, he might not be able to hide from the experts in the valley. For example, it was said that Lu Yanqing, the world's most beautiful woman, was beaten by Changchun from the middle stage of soul formation back to the early stage of soul formation. However, after seeing her in Cornucopia Bingqingzi, he was surprised by Lu Yanqing's miraculous hands, and her cultivation actually recovered to the middle stage of soul formation. Therefore, there was no harm done. If he sneaked in and was discovered by Lu Yanqing, he was afraid that things would not go so smoothly. Now that he had Ninth Brother Xian, even if Lu Yanqing used force, with two soul formation experts working together, he really didn't have to be afraid of her. Thinking of this, the smile on Yan Juexing's face became wider. In the end, he laughed wildly. His wild laughter echoed in Lingfang Valley. The chaos in Lingfang Valley had already alarmed the people in the medicine hut. The remaining 4 brothers of the Xian family all rushed to the scene. After seeing the situation in the abode, they looked at each other. The eldest brother of the Xian family frowned and said in a deep voice, "Ninth brother, what's going on?" On the top of Medicine Hut, Lu Yanqing, who was dressed in green, led the enchantress and Yan Yu out of the small courtyard. The 3 of them stopped at the edge of the cliff and silently watched the movement below. Inside the abode, Ninth Brother Xian called out to them, "Eldest brother, second brother, fourth brother, eighth brother, come in for a moment." He pointed to Yan Juexing and said, "He brought news of third brother. You guys come and listen together." The 4 brothers looked at each other. The younger brother did not suspect anything was wrong when he called. Instead, he flashed in with a face full of surprise. As for the disciples of Spirit Fang Valley outside, they still did not know what had happened just now. After all, no one had ever seen anyone use the evil magic of the magic eye. They thought that the previous disciple had somehow offended Xian Laojiu. Thinking of that scene, everyone had a lingering fear in their hearts. No one stopped the 4 brothers from entering. Once the 4 brothers entered the abode, they couldn't avoid the dead bodies on the ground. Eldest brother Xian stared at the ground and frowned. "Ninth brother, what's going on?" Just as he looked up, he saw the eyes of the man in black next to Ninth Brother Xian explode with red light, messing up his consciousness. His expression instantly became sluggish. The other 3 immediately felt something was wrong. Especially second brother Xian. His reaction was quite fast. He immediately shouted, "Where did this demon come from?" He directly threw a palm at Yan Juexing, deciding to stop him first. Who would have thought that in a blur, Ninth Brother Xian had already teleported in front of him? Second Brother Xian was stunned and was forced to stop. But what he never expected was that Xian Laojiu's lightning-fast punch had already landed on his chest. In a situation where he had no defense at all, he was mercilessly punched by a soul formation stage master. The situation could be imagined. Before second brother Xian could finish his words, he was sent flying by the punch. With a bang, he crashed into the abode. Blood spurted out from his mouth, spraying into the air like a blood pillar. With a bang, he fell outside completely motionless. He didn't even have the chance to scream. Fourth brother and eighth brother Xian simply couldn't believe that all of this was real. The two of them were completely dumbfounded, and their minds were blank. Yan Juexing, who subdued eldest brother Xian, also didn't expect such a good thing to happen. He calmly subdued the day's fourth brother and eighth brother one by one. After the Spirit Fong Valley disciples outside the abode witnessed all of this, they were all dumbfounded. They didn't know what was going on. Normally, they were like blood brothers. Why did they start killing each other? Some of the disciples who reacted quickly recalled that Yan Juexing had previously said that his name was Yan Juexing. Coupled with his demonic red eyes, they immediately shouted, "He is Yan Juexing. That is the demon eye. Martial uncles and martial uncles are being controlled by the demon eye." When Lu Yanqing saw second brother Xian flying out of the abode, she was also a little dumbfounded. When she heard someone shouting, "Yan Juexing and the demon eye," she was immediately shocked and directly teleported down. The Allure Beauty and Yan Yu looked at each other in horror, then quickly followed after them. Yan Juexing was slowly walking out of the abode. Behind him were the eldest brother, fourth brother, eighth brother and ninth brother of the Xian clan. When Lu Yanqing landed, Yan Juexing immediately stopped and sneered. Then, two women landed behind Lu Yanqing, causing him to squint his eyes. He nodded slightly and said, "100 Charms Beauty and Master Yan, I didn't expect you to still be here. It really surprised me. Good, this is really good. Everyone is here. Saves me the trouble of searching everywhere." Chapter 765. He was really happy. He thought that Yu Qianqiu would definitely take the two women away when he came here last time. He didn't expect them to still be here. If he had known this, he would have come to Spirit Fong Valley first instead of going to the Wen family to suffer. But then again, if he wasn't full of self-confidence and wanted to control Wen Lanfeng to help him deal with Niu Yud, so that he could deal with Yu Qianqiu, he wouldn't have provoked Wen Lanfeng for the time being. Lu Yanqing was even more so. To put it bluntly, Lu Yanqing was just a vase to him, no matter how beautiful she was. But controlling Wen Lanfeng would be of great use. Not to mention the shame of Spirit Fong Valley. It was estimated that Wen Lanfeng was the only one in the cultivation world who could barely be Niu Yud's opponent. Moreover, he could get the whereabouts of Yu Qianqiu from Wen Lanfeng. At the same time, he could use Wen Lanfeng to intimidate those in the cultivation world who had bad intentions towards him. In short, as long as he controlled Wen Lanfeng, many troubles could be easily solved. But reality was cruel. Wen Lanfeng wasn't so easy to deal with. If Wen Rui hadn't succeeded in the sneak attack and injured Wen Lanfeng, he might have had to use blood escape to escape. Since Wen Lanfeng couldn't control him, he could only destroy him to avoid endless troubles. Moreover, after the incident with the Wen family, Wen Lanfeng definitely wouldn't let him go. Because of this, Lu Yanqing played a role in his eyes. This was also the purpose of his coming to Spirit Fong Valley. However, what he never thought was that Temptress and Yin Yu were still here. One had an ambiguous relationship with Yu Qianqiu, and the other was Niu Yud's woman. The harvest this time was simply too great. How could Yan Juexing not be happy when the two women, who had a close relationship with his two enemies, were here? Temptress and Yan Yu looked at each other speechlessly. The three women, including Lu Yanqing, were shocked. They had all seen Yan Juexing, and the person in front of them was indeed Yan Juexing. However, what the three of them couldn't understand was that didn't Yu Qianqiu say that Yan Juexing's arm had been chopped off by him? Why was it still fine? Out of the three girls, Lu Yanqing was the most shocked. She could tell that Yan Juexing's cultivation had already reached the spirit severing stage. When the disciples of Spirit Fong Valley saw their grandmaster, they immediately became courageous. A few disciples hurriedly carried second brother Xian's body over and cried, "Grandmaster, Master is already dead." Lu Yanqing was not a person who was easily angered. Seeing her disciple die tragically, she immediately flew into a rage. Her beautiful face was frosty as she stared at Yan Juexing and shouted, "Yan Juexing, did you kill him?" Yan Juexing smiled but did not answer. Instead, it was the Lingfang Valley disciple who stammered, "Grandmaster, my master was killed by ninth martial uncle." Lu Yanqing was shocked when she heard this. She glared at old ninth Xian and said, "Old ninth, is what he said true?" Xian Laojiao stood obediently behind Yan Juexing without saying a word. After Yan Juexing looked at Lu Yanqing from head to toe, he said in a breathtaking tone, "You are indeed the world's most beautiful woman. You are indeed unparalleled in the world. No wonder when Lanfeng can't forget you. Although I have seen Senior at the cornucopia, it is a pity that I did not see your true appearance. Seeing you today, this trip was not in vain. This junior finally knows what a beauty is." Not mentioning cornucopia would have been fine, but the moment cornucopia was mentioned, Lu Yanqing regretted it so much that her intestines were about to break. If she had not stopped Yu Qianqiu from making a move, how could Spirit Fang Valley have suffered such a disaster today? For a moment, Yu Qianqiu's warning at the cornucopia kept lingering in her mind. Unfortunately, Yu Qianqiu was right. She regretted not being able to do it in the first place. Where is third brother Xian? Was he also killed by you? Lu Yanqing's white face flashed with unease as she asked. Yan Juexing pointed to old ninth Xian, and the others behind him, and said indifferently, "Just like them, alive and well." Lu Yanqing's eyes swept over several disciples and said word by word, "Come back." However, after calling out a few times, no one listened to her. She immediately gritted her teeth, and a pair of small golden knives appeared in her hands. It seemed that she, who had always hated fighting and killing, was also about to make a move. Yan Juexing's face revealed a sarcastic look and said indifferently, "Senior Lu, I advise you not to be impulsive. Otherwise, you will not be able to bear the consequences." As he said, he slightly tilted his head and said, "Boss Xian, your master's emotions are very unstable. You should die in front of your master, and let her calm down." "Yes." Boss Xian bowed slightly, and directly hit the top of his head with his palm. In an instant, red and white things burst out, and he fell to the ground on the spot. He twitched twice and stopped moving. "No!" Lu Yanqing exclaimed. The Spirit Fang Valley disciples behind were shocked, and looked at the scene in front of them in disbelief. The temptress and Yan Yu's faces also changed greatly. Only Yan Juexing and the others were indifferent. Especially old ninth Xian and the others. They simply did not care about the life and death of their own brothers. Yan Juexing said indifferently, "Senior Lu, I was right. If you dare to make me unhappy again, I only need to say a word, and all your disciples will die in front of you. If you don't believe me, you can try again." Lu Yanqing heard this, and immediately felt a sense of powerlessness. Looking at the dead boss Xian, she was a little confused. "Senior Lu," Yan Juexing suddenly called out softly. Lu Yanqing slowly raised her head. Just as she made eye contact with him, she immediately saw a demonic red light bursting out from his eyes. In the blink of an eye, she was in the middle of a vast sea of blood. Numerous blood vines quickly entangled her and tied her up. Lu Yanqing was shocked, and immediately remembered that the other party was using the demonic eye. She immediately struggled and used all her strength to break the blood vines that tied her up. At the moment when the blood vines broke, her eyes regained clarity, and the scene of Spirit Fang Valley reappeared. Yan Juexing slightly staggered, and his face was a little pale. He finally believed that the demonic eye could only be controlled by those below the soul formation stage. Once one reached the soul formation stage, he could only control opponents of the same level. With Lu Yanqing's cultivation, he had no way to control her. Amidst the exclamations of the Spirit Fang Valley disciples, the temptress and Yan Yu supported Lu Yanqing at the same time, and said anxiously in unison, "Senior, are you all right?" Lu Yanqing shook her head slightly and gritted her teeth with a pretty face. "Yan Juexing, How dare you use the demonic eye on me? Yan Juexing slightly calmed down and said indifferently, why can't I? It's a pity that Senior Lu's cultivation is profound, and this junior can't control it for the time being. What a pity. You. Lu Yanqing glanced at the disciples that were controlled by Yan Juexing, and swallowed the harsh words that were about to come out of her mouth. She gritted her teeth and said, what do you want for you to let them go? Humph. Yan Juexing sneered and looked back and forth between the girls. Who can tell me where Yu Qianqiu is? The three girls were startled. The temptress really didn't know where Yu Qianqiu was, because she didn't know that Yu Qianqiu was Niu Yid. However, the other two girls knew in their hearts, but they wouldn't say it no matter what. Yin Yu could be said to be dead set on Yu Qianqiu. How could she harm Yu Qianqiu? And Lu Yanqing wasn't the kind of person who would sacrifice others to save her disciple. In the silence, Yan Juexing indifferently said, since you're not saying anything, it means that someone knows but doesn't want to tell me. Senior Lu, could it be that you want your disciple to die on the spot? Lu Yanqing's face instantly turned pale. She bit her lips and said, I don't even know where Yu Qianqiu is. Even if you kill them all, I still won't know. Yan Juexing was startled. How could he kill all her disciples? They were the bargaining chips to blackmail her. If he killed them all, she would immediately fight him with her life. He immediately nodded and said, it seems that Senior Lu really doesn't know. As he spoke, the demonic red light in his eyes suddenly appeared again, and directly locked onto the temptress's eyes. The temptress's expression instantly became stupid, and she foolishly walked towards him. No! Yan Yu immediately grabbed the temptress, and refused to let her go. Yan Juexing snorted coldly. In for a penny, in for a pound. He seized the opportunity, and his eyes turned red again. In an instant, he also controlled the careless Yin Yu in his hands. In the end, the two girls walked towards him together. Lu Yanqing quickly grabbed the two of them. Yan Juexing angrily shouted, if you don't want old Ninth Exine to die, let go. Lu Yanqing's body trembled. She subconsciously let go and watched the two girls walk towards Yan Juexing. Yan Juexing snorted coldly, and stared at the two girls who were walking over. He asked, which one of you knows where Yu Qianqiu is? The two girls' dumbfounded expressions came back to life. The temptress shook her head to indicate that she didn't know. Yin Yu paused and then reported, Yu Qianqiu is actually Niu Yid. Niu Yid and Yu Qianqiu are the same person. He should be in the demon domain. What? Yan Juexing exclaimed. He thought that he had heard wrongly. He hurriedly asked again, are you sure that Niu Yid is Yu Qianqiu? Yin Yu said respectfully, there's no mistake. I'm sure. Because I realized that Niu Yid has been wearing a human skin mask. Yan Juexing still didn't believe it. He said, then why is there such a huge difference in their cultivation? I can't figure it out either, Yin Yu replied. Yan Juexing was worried that she was fooling him. He checked again to make sure that Yin Yu was indeed under his control and wasn't lying. He was immediately dumbfounded. If Yin Yu hadn't told him, he would never have thought that Niu Yid was Yu Qianqiu. This also explained why Niu Yid purposely spread the news, to make him be hunted, even though he had no enmity with him. It turned out that it was all Yu Qianqiu's doing. Such a shameless way of doing things was indeed Yu Qianqiu's style. However, he couldn't figure out why his cultivation could shake the cultivation world when he was Niu Yid. But his cultivation was only at the tribulation stage when he was Yu Qianqiu. There was definitely a secret that he didn't know. Maybe Yu Qianqiu was playing tricks on him. Otherwise, with Niu Yid's ability, there was no reason for him to show mercy when fighting with him. At the thought of this, anger burned in his chest. He had been fooled by that guy for such a long time. It was intolerable. He suddenly turned around and said, Senior Lu, I'm afraid I need your help with something. Please ask Senior Wen Lanfeng to come over. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.